after the disengagement, at some point we created a buffer zone.
Right.
Because of constant rioting, constant threats, and so on.
Makes sense. How big was the buffer zone?
It's about, let's say, half a kilometer. But in which case, we're talking about a few hundred meters from the fence.
Right.
That once you cross that, you're already in Israel, right?
Yeah.
So imagine we had a buffer zone.
Yeah.
Do you know who removed the buffer zone? Because it got removed.
Netanyahu?
No, Obama.
What?
Obama pressured Israel to remove the buffer as a sign and gesture of goodwill to the Palestinians in Gaza, who are under constant threat of feeling that their land is being taken and whatever.
Where life takes a spin. Join the fun, let the talk begin.
Hello and welcome to Hakol Sababa. We have a special guest tonight. We have Doron Keidar, who is an executive protection professional and a podcaster and a filmmaker. And we just met for the first time this morning over the phone. And I'm fascinated to find out where this conversation is going to take us. So start out from your backstory, from where you came from and how you got to where you are.
I'd say the backstory is it's the very traditional story for the Jewish people. They come back to Israel, make aliyah, Zionists and all this. No, not really. So my story is very different to most Israeli stories, I would say, being that my family originated from the United States. I grew up in a Christian evangelical home. Mainly my father was the Zionist in the family. He grew up in a home that taught him that the Jewish people are special, that the Jewish people are God's chosen people. And during the breakout of World War II, when the Americans finally heard of what was going on in the war and that the Nazis were systematically basically genociding Jews in all of Europe, that just outraged my dad. And so he was 15 years old, lied about his age. He went to the naval recruitment station, lied about his age, said he was 18, of course, and joined his buddies who had already been deployed from his neighborhood. So he had many kids that already had joined that were older than him. They had grown up with, doing sports with, and all that kind of deal. So he knew a little bit from postcards and stuff from friends of his that were sending him from, the war front.
Right.
And so his motivation, like I said, was that his father drilled into him the importance of God's chosen people. And I think what kind of sowed that seed in his mind was as a child, he grew up with a father who was a barber during the day, but also was a sparrer. He would spar with the heavyweight boxers in the Washington, D.C. area. And we're talking about the early 20s, during the Depression and all that. And so a real man's man. And, my father wanted to, of course, always win my grandfather's approval, being the oldest in the family as well, and so on. Yeah. So one day he came home all beat up. And his father asked him, what happened? He said, oh, no big deal. I won. Don't worry about it. Like he felt all, macho about himself. And
different generation. Eh?
Yeah. Different generation than today. Right. And so his father said, okay, sure. Great. But who did you fight with? And he said, it was the rabbi's son. No big deal. And then his father stopped him in his tracks and says, wait. He says, they're God's chosen people. Don't you ever lift a finger on them. And so that's the only story that I heard from my father that I remember as a child that he had told me at one point. And I'm assuming that was the seed that was sown that led to his getting drafted at the age of 15, lying about his age, joined the naval units. He was in the submarines and deployed actually to the Pacific. So he actually didn't get to see any Nazis to my knowledge. But like I said, that was his motivation. After the war, my father had learned electrical engineering. He didn't finish high school naturally. So everything he had learned occupationally was during his military service. And When he got out, he opened up an electric shop in Washington, D.C., sold the first television sets back in the early 30s, or 40s, excuse me, and essentially grew in the ranks, I guess you could say, in electrical engineering, and at some point ended up in Fort Lauderdale and Miami as an electrical engineer during the building.
Yeah, this is Charles Baer. I'm your host on Hakol Sababa. I hope you're enjoying our content. And if you'd like to see more content like this and better content, maybe you can do me a favor. If you're on YouTube, please can you just go and click that subscribe button? And if you're on Spotify, click the follow button under my podcast. The more people that I've got following and subscribing to my channel, the more the algorithm wants to promote my content and show it to more people, and success breeds success. It snowballs. Also, when we're looking for guests to come onto the show, it's a lot more of an incentive for them to come on the show if we got, for example, 100,000 subscribers or something modest like that. So if you can just do me a solid, it'll take you a second and it'll cost you nothing. Just go and click subscribe, follow, whatever it is, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the show.
And so a lot of the buildings are still standing today. The government buildings that were projects that he worked on and or hotels are still standing till this day. And at some point, one of his good friends that was within the building community, they each had different areas of these big projects, reached out to him and said, hey, Israel just had the 6-Day War, big deal. I know you're excited about that, of course, because you're this crazy Zionist. But here's the deal. They need American contractors to come to Israel because the United States made an agreement and pressured Israel to give back the Sinai in...
the Sinai, that was 79 that they gave it back, I think.
No. Well, it took a few years, correct. Yeah. It took a few years. It was early 70s.
Because the 6 Day was 67, then there was the Yom Kippur War still in 73.
Correct.
And Egypt was still fighting them, and it was only after Sadat came to Jerusalem and
correct. That's exactly it. Mm-hmm. So, but the negotiations were based on the 6-Day War, right? On land that was gained during the 6-Day War, where we got the whole Sinai and all that. So in any case, the Americans were pressured by the Egyptians to give back the Sinai if they would basically grant Israel a defense budget and military bases and so on.
Mm-hmm. So just want to interject a little question here, completely, which is just a tangent from what we're talking about over here, but it just struck me now, and I don't know why I've never thought of this before. Yeah. But Egypt got back the Sinai in the peace deal. Why didn't they take Gaza too? Because Gaza was also conquered from Egypt at the time.
Because it's a great question. That's a very good question. I would say the reason why they did not want the Gaza Strip is simply because that area is of no importance to them historically.
Didn't have any oil.
Yeah, there was no value to it, right? Mm-hmm. There was, really, here's the irony. I mean, it's an interesting point.
And because I suppose perhaps because Gaza was part of the original mandate.
Maybe, I would imagine.
Whereas Sinai was but
correct.
Up until then had always been part of Egypt.
Correct.
And they only took it during the War of Independence, and now they weren't going to fight about getting that back.
Correct. I think the interesting thing about Egypt and the Gaza Strip is that, ironically, the only value to Gaza only came when Jews moved to the Gaza Strip, actually in reaction to this giving away of the Sinai, because Jews had already built whole communities and everything, and that was the whole horrible pullout led by Ariel Sharon, and also the mastermind behind the Gaza communities, the Jewish Gaza communities. He's the mastermind behind that. He's the one that reached out to the rabbis, the community leaders, and convinced them to establish Jewish communities in the Gaza Strip as a gift to, or how to say, as a substitute to what they'd already started to build down in the Sinai. And then, ironically, as we know, years later in 2005, unfortunately, Ariel Sharon becomes prime minister at this time, and then he's the one who orchestrates the pullout from Gaza.
Yeah.
Those very same communities that he convinced them that it was so important to move and establish there in Gaza. But in any case, the only value to that area started when Jews were moving there and actually created something out of nothing.
Yeah.
They created the largest agricultural production in Israel. In fact, about 90% of our export came from the Gaza farming communities before the pullout in 2005, for example. None of which have been used by the Gazans after the pullout.
I mean, that's just Israel history written small.
Yeah.
Because before Jews came back to what was Ottoman Palestine at the time, it was a wasteland.
Yeah, just read Mark Twain. I mean, Mark Twain. I love Mark Twain because he is not a Christian. He's not a Zionist. He's, to my understanding, he's an atheist, and he basically is making fun of Christians in America, saying, you guys are nuts. You're talking about Jerusalem of gold. You're talking about the land flowing with milk and honey. And he just mocks the biblical narrative and the way God, commanded and blessed this land.
I didn't that aspect of it.
I
always hear a bit about where he's so complimentary about the Jews and what is his secret and everything.
Sure, but it was. But at the same time, it was always to kind of sting the kind of this Christian view that he grew up in. And so, ironically, as graphic as he was to the desolation of the land of Israel without the Jews, right? Because it was a desolate place. Jerusalem was an armpit of the Middle East. Yet the Muslims call it the third holiest place in Islam, and that's just absolute nonsense.
Which they only discovered after we got there.
Correct. And I'm not saying that their claim, I'm not going to tell people what to claim, but the point is, if this is the third holiest site, I'm not the one who's saying this. Muslims who visit the site, friends of mine, some of which, have made this claim. We give our donations to the beautifying of the Waqf, which is the Islamic controlled areas, and this is supposed to be the third holiest site in Islam, and they're saying, as we come here, this place is an armpit. Like, what have you done with our money is their claim. This is their gripe. And I agree with them. I mean, if you look at the Temple Mount...
I'm completely shocked. They took the money and didn't use it for its intended purpose.
Exactly.
How can that be?
Yeah. So this isn't a Zionist sting. This is actually coming from Muslims themselves who come from other countries, and they come and visit the holy sites, which they have been made to believe this is the third holiest site to them, and nothing special, right? To show for all the money that's been put into this site and custodianship of the Waqf via Jordan, right? But in any case, so this is actually what brought my family to Israel, was my dad being a contractor. He came here, worked for the U.S. government, and actually left his first wife and my older sister, who just finished high school at the time. So his first wife, daughter, left behind with all the money and the nice house and everything, and literally came here with nothing. And then he met his second wife, a young girl who was still in her military service from Kiryat Shmona, from northern Israel. And so that's essentially what brought myself and my brothers to be raised in northern Israel.
That's your mother you're talking about?
No, through the third wife.
Okay.
But it's the Jewish girl who came from a Middle Eastern family, because anybody who knows Kiryat Shmona in the early days know that it was predominantly Middle Eastern Jews from Edot HaMizrach. So I basically ended up growing up with Moroccans and Iraqis and Yemenites and the whole deal. So I was actually the odd kid who was the white guy, so to speak, the foreigner, before we had the Russian Aliyah and the Ethiopian Aliyah that came in the 90s. So my father ends up leaving his second wife after they bought their home together in Kiryat Shmona and everything. She had her eyes fixed on moving to the U.S. my father had his eyes and his heart in Israel, and he's like, that's not happening. So they split up.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, she married
quite ironic.
She married a good wealthy Jewish guy, I think from New York. I believe he was a lawyer or something like that, and never turned back. My father then met my mom, who is Catholic, and she was the one who was willing to move with him to Israel and start a family on the other side of the ocean.
He came back to the States to meet her?
Came back to the U.S., yeah. Yeah, so he met my mom through a mutual friend, and so they both moved to Israel and first lived in the contractor's home in Eilat, which is where I was born with my twin brother. And then about a year later, we left the contractor's home and then moved to the house that he had bought with his second wife up in Kiryat Shmona. And then my younger brother was born. So there was 3 of us who were born in Israel from my whole family. The rest of our family live in the U.S. None of my family, my biological family, none of them have ever lived here or joined us at any time. So essentially, I basically grew up in Israel alone, no family, like original family, so to speak, but ended up with adoptive families. So one of the families that till today are what I would consider family.
Just come back a second.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, your parents were living in Eilat. You were born in Eilat. What happened to your family? They went back to America and you stayed? Or
No. My parents.
Yes.
Right?
So your parents stayed here?
Correct.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, so so when you say you didn't have any other family, you didn't have any or extended family, you still had your core family?
Correct. Just my mom and my dad and my brothers is what I'm saying.
Okay, fine.
Yeah. None of my aunts, uncles, what have you, ever joined us living in Israel is what I'm saying. So essentially, we just grew up, detached from the rest of our family and our extended family that were all throughout in the U.S. But I ended up with alternate families, if you like, that were of Moroccan descent, that took us to the synagogue, and we had Shabbat with them, and we had the Jewish upbringing and experience. While at home, my buddies would say, "Hey, when you guys put up that Christmas tree, let me know, okay?" Because they all wanted to see this happening, and they didn't know when it was. They didn't know when Christmas was. Of course, growing up in a Jewish home, and again, growing up in Middle Eastern homes, they had zero experience of that, like the Jews who came from Europe or America. And so my buddies would always, get me to or convince me to let them in on, hey, I have that thing in my house, you guys could come and check it out, all decked out with lights. And of course, my dad being an electrician, I mean, that tree was like, it was...
Yes, it was lit.
It was lit. It was properly decorated from head to toe.
Yeah.
And and so that was just my upbringing. Is I would share our crazy tree thing that we had in our house. I actually didn't even know why we had it. I just knew we did it. But of course, I knew why we were going to doing the prayers and why the Shabbat and all that, because that was my upbringing. It was with Jews, right? So it's kind of funny. It's like on the one hand, I knew why they did what they did. I didn't quite understand why we did what we did at home, and so. Long story short is we ended up with a trauma in my family where my twin brother ended up passing away in a smoke fire.
Wow.
So in our bedroom where we slept during our nap, and my dad at this time is deployed somewhere in Egypt, my mom was sleeping with my newborn brother in the parents' bedroom, and then down the hall, it was myself and my twin in the room where the smoke fire started.
How old were you?
We were 2 years old. We were just 2 in a few months. And what happened is a piece of coil flew off of the heater and it landed right on the small little rug right in front of our crib. And that caused the smoke to fill the house and a poisonous smoke to basically slowly kill us in our sleep. So what happens is my young brother who's just born, he starts crying probably because he wants a nurse. My mom wakes up, she's disoriented. She can see what's happening, or she can tell that something weird is happening. She doesn't know what. She reaches over, and thank God she had a phone right by her bed nightstand. Although there was no speed dial back then, it was the tick 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 tick. Yeah. And so she's ticking away, calling Yaakov and Lillian, who are, like I said, my extended family in Israel. So they live down the street, and thank God Yaakov knows our house inside out. I mean, their whole family does. But Yaakov is the one who rushes to our house, only to see that everything looks normal on the outside, and he's a little confused. He's like, it was a cold winter day. It was raining. It was just around Purim time, and what happens is he opens the front door, and then the building smoke comes out, and then he realized instantly, crap. There's obviously a fire going on in the house. So thank goodness there isn't an actual fire happening, but there is the poisonous smoke, like I said, that has been filling the house slowly while we were all sleeping and napping. So Yaakov rushes in, he goes into our bedrooms, pulls us out of our beds, gets us out to safety to breathe air. And my young brother at this point, he's my younger twin. So the younger twin, he is without a pulse. Lillian, the wife, she happens to be a nurse and has medical training, so she immediately checks our pulses, the whole thing. And when the Israeli Magen David Adom arrive, she hands me over to them and says, "This one still has a pulse. Rush him to the hospital." So they rushed me to Rambam Hospital. They had one machine in the whole hospital at that time that could pump the poison out of my system, and thank God it was available. So they plug me up and start to do the treatment to get all the poisons out of my system. My younger brother and my mom are relatively okay. They go to the hospital in Hadassah just nearby. They're fine. And my father, of course, gets the news. He tries to make it, but he can't, because his pilot that night ends up getting drunk, falls into the water, and drowns. So now he needs to find an alternate pilot to rush to this trauma that's happening with his family. So I'm not exactly sure how long it took him to arrive, but I believe it was a day or two later he makes it. Because again, we're talking about back in the early 80s in the Middle East, yeah? There is no catch the next flight nonsense, like in a few hours. We're talking about catch the next flight in a day from now, at best. So he arrives, he sees what's happening, and he realizes I'm all alone in the hospital. My mother at this time, she just checks out mentally. So she's literally sitting in her home, staring at the wall. The walls are all darkened from the smoke, and is just checked out. I'm assuming my younger brother is taken care of by probably Yaakov or Lillian, and I'm in Rambam all by myself until my father arrives. So the only thing I remember from the whole incident was actually my father walking into the hospital room and just being completely traumatic. I started breaking down crying. I tried to rip all these tubes and stuff out of me. And that's the only thing I remember from the whole deal. So what happens is this whole trauma essentially changes the whole trajectory of my whole family. My mom and dad ended up basically not getting along for years. My father basically blamed her and her smoking and saying it's because you smoked and you probably dropped your cigarette or whatever. And even though the firemen clearly said it was the heater that caused the fire, he had always blamed her, and they would get in fights. And my father essentially became an alcoholic. He became violent, and then unfortunately I grew up with the abuse and my mom. My younger brother, he was never touched. He was never disciplined, basically, like his whole childhood. But I would get beaten sometimes half to death. Literally, I would wake up, hours later after the beating from just being beaten unconscious and that kind of stuff. So the family situation wasn't so great. the social workers were starting to figure out that something's wrong at home, and Yaakov and Lillian couldn't intervene anymore. I mean, they tried. They're like a brother and sister to my parents. But at some point, I remember Lillian basically put her foot down and told my father, she says, I am done trying to convince you to stop your drinking and all the mess that you're causing, et cetera, et cetera. She's like, I'm basically, I'm cutting our relationship right here and right now, unless you make the drastic changes that you need to make, kind of thing.
Right.
So that, of course, never.
Was there like an Alcoholics Anonymous available or something?
No,
like that?
not a. Yeah, I don't even know if they have that in Israel, but there was a Christian organization in Haifa called House of Victory. This place was founded by a couple who left New York City. The father was he himself was a recovering alcoholic. He was a professor at Fordham University. He was an actor. He was the professor of performing arts at Fordham, the Fordham University, which is also where Denzel Washington went to school in the 70s. Mm-hmm. And my father, or my foster dad, he's the one that actually found Denzel Washington. He was the talent, noticed the talent, connected him, got him on his way, so to speak. And then, of course, the rest is history. And we all know he's one of the more famous actors today.
Yeah.
Also, he would act with people like Anthony Hopkins that he acted in a film with. So it's like he knew all those people, that were famous, and at the peak of the 70s and early 80s. But like I said, he also became an alcoholic. He was miserable, and one of his students says to him, there's a church down the street where all these actors and performers and what have you go, and I think it would be good for you, kind of thing. And he's like, well, I'm Catholic, and they're like, yeah, but we think you actually need an encounter with God, kind of thing. It's not that
It's actually interesting that you bring this up. I was one of my earlier podcasts was with a mutual friend of mine and Jared's, also Rabbi Gabi Bokatz.
Yes.
In South Africa. Do you know him?
No,
you've heard of him.
No.
No, so he was also talking about his experience going through his own alcohol crisis and going through Alcoholics Anonymous, and he says, I was actually just re-listening to it today because it was such an amazing conversation.
Yeah.
But he was saying how the Alcoholics Anonymous is so founded on faith, whatever faith that you have.
Right.
It's
That's
got to
what
be
I've heard.
something. You've got to find some sort of spirituality to lift you out of it, because
correct.
And he was also saying
a higher power, right?
Higher power.
Yeah, you can't do it in your own strength, essentially. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was kind of what these students noticed, right? Some of these students that were, basically more serious in their faith, right? Mm. And they could just tell, it's like, yeah, you might have a Catholic background and went to a Jesuit high school, but it's like, clearly you don't have any real faith. You know what I mean? Like, they can see his lifestyle. They can see, it doesn't match up to, the Christian standard, so to speak. And so David Wilkerson, David, his name's David Davis, went to this meeting, and he had a very powerful encounter with God. And that basically changed the trajectory of his life. He got delivered from his alcohol, and also, I believe he was also doing drugs, not like heavy, but the kind of party drugs that the people do in the Hollywood scene and all that kind of deal. And so basically got free from all that, and then he got connected with a ministry to drug addicts and alcoholics out of a church called Times Square Church.
Hold on, this is not. I've lost track of this.
These are my
Israel.
foster parents in Israel.
Okay, sorry. I thought we were talking about your dad there.
No.
Okay,
no.
Sorry.
Yes.
When did I missed the transition from your bio parents to your foster parents?
Correct. Because you're asking if there was an Alcoholics Anonymous for my dad.
Ah, okay.
And so I say there wasn't, but there was a Christian ministry in Israel, in Haifa.
Right.
And the founders of that are the couple I was talking about. And so, like I said, the husband, right? He had this whole experience, got connected with David Wilkerson, who's a very well-known evangelical minister in America, who started, with him and his family, they started a ministry called Teen Challenge. And so essentially it's, to my knowledge, till today as well, it's the most successful drug and alcohol rehab in America. And it's very well known. But that was in the beginning stages. And so David Davis, the foster dad, he came to Israel with his wife, who is Jewish. And this was in the late 80s. And then in I think it was in 1990 they finally moved to Israel, because they were shocked when they visited to discover that there was drugs and alcohol issues in Israel, and specifically in the old city in Jerusalem. And they ran into it through a Christian woman that they were staying with in the old city, who her son was suffering from a drug addiction. And so for them, this was kind of like one of those like shocking moments of, wait, there's drugs and alcohol in the holy land of Israel, you know? And so, and so they discovered basically that because of all the terrorism and all of the things that the Israelis go through, that there has been a pandemic, but basically a very upscale during the early 90s in drug and well, mainly in drugs, but also in alcohol abuse. And so they thought, well, if we can come and start a drug and alcohol rehab, not a teen challenge, but something that can be different and specifically catered towards the group of people that are needing this the most, who are alcoholics and drug addicts, like Arabs from the old city, like from the Russian Aliyah, you had many that had alcohol issues.
Alcohol is like water.
Yeah, but then we also had some Israelis, like one of my good friends, his name was Gonen, who was a very talented soccer player, right? But you know, the money and the soccer and the girls went to his head, and then he ended up becoming dependent on drugs, right? For his high-speed life that he was living. And unfortunately, we ended up burying him because he always liked, I'll put it like this, he always liked to walk the fine line of, the rules, right? And it was that one time that they let him off on his first vacation, the first time out of the program for a little bit, and then come back. He chose not to come back. Instead, he chose to hook up with some girl. They, had a bunch of fun and whatever in an apartment, but then ended up in an overdose. And unfortunately, that was the first person that I knew personally that we ended up burying. And of course, to me, that was a very strong message of...
How old were you?
I was maybe 15, I think. And so that was a strong message of, here's what happens, when you mess around with that world, right? But we're kind of jumping forward and backwards.
That's right. But I want to get the transition of like...
But how did I get to this couple, right?
Yeah.
So good friends of ours, of my parents, actually a South African. His name was Tony. This is a gentleman who was from a Christian background, I believe, who knew my family, knew that they were Christians, and were trying to find a good suit for their kids. And so they reached out to this drug and alcohol rehab and said, listen, the dad's an alcoholic, the mom is in a mental institute, but maybe you can do something with them. Maybe you have a solution kind of thing. And they were just like, we don't take kids in this rehab. I mean, these are like adults. We have Fatah terrorists who are recovering from here. We have, drug addicts and alcoholics who come from very hard backgrounds. Like, this isn't a place for kids. And they said, yeah, sure, but why don't you just meet them? Like he was, just basically persistent. And so he fooled my brother and I to come and said, have you ever been to Haifa? We're like, no. It's like, we grew up in Kiryat Shmona, and I've never really seen much outside of Kiryat Shmona, other than touring with my dad, which was something he liked to do. He liked to take us on the weekends to all kinds of places and see the country. But other than that, no, we didn't really, I don't ever remember hearing of or seeing Haifa. So he tells us, there's a beach there. And we're like, oh, there's a beach there? That's so cool, I've never been to the beach, you know. And so he convinced us to go, and yeah, we go to the beach, we have fun, but then he takes us by the rehab, and he gets us to meet David Davis, the head of this ministry, who is also formerly an actor and also formerly an alcoholic himself.
Yeah.
And so he also is a former Marine, so he knows how to be very serious, and he knows how to turn on that whole military kind of mode. And so he's sitting there outside with a table in the courtyard. I'll never forget it. It's a very beautiful garden that they have there where this rehab is situated in downtown Haifa. And they have beautiful bougainvillea trees all around. It's a nice sunny day. He's got his Ray-Ban glasses on. He looks like one of those movie actors with the Ray-Ban, you know, the cliche kind of look. He has that cool American, you know, hair. And then standing up next to him is this Hispanic, fresh, out of the Marines, big dude. And he goes, you know, he says, "Hi, my name is David Davis. You know, this here, you know, he's a Marine. He just got out here." And I'm like, "Yeah, I can see he's got that crew cut." You know, I'm like, "Okay," you know. And he's basically trying to intimidate us. He's telling us how tough it is, and this guy will pour cold water on us if we don't wake up in the morning and go to school and blah 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 and do our homework and our chores. And you have to do your chores like everyone else here. You know, cooking, cleaning, you name it.
This is like completely like, what are you talking about? I thought we were just coming to the beach.
No, we're going. So we go from the beach to the rehab.
Yes.
So that's how he gets us to Haifa, Tony. But
you thought you were just going to the beach.
Correct. And then we go from the beach to this, and I'm like, what the heck is this, right? So I can tell that I'm basically been suckered into a meeting with some place. And I know at this point already that they've been trying to find an alternative living conditions for my brother and I, right? They've been trying to get us to boarding schools. They've been trying to get us...
Were you still living with your father?
Yeah. So we're basically on the streets.
And your mother had been institutionalized?
She's at this time, she's in the mental institution. We're basically running on the streets, free, don't go to school, the whole thing.
Yeah. Like
basically do whatever we want. And I'm well on my way of becoming basically a street thug, right?
How old are you?
13. So I'm 13 years old, and you know, seen a lot of street gang violence and all this kind of stuff growing up because I'd hang out with the kids from the more rougher neighborhoods of Kiryat Shmona.
Yeah.
Even though where I actually lived was in the villas, I mean a very small villa, but we lived in the nicer, quiet neighborhood, the more responsible, you know, either a religious family on the one side of the family, on the one side of the street, I mean, to the guy who owned the watch shop, to, you know, I mean, just like your straight lace,
upstanding citizens.
Yeah, like your straight lace kind of stuff. No real violence on my street kind of thing. But the guys I would hang out with were the ones who lived in the block buildings, and where there was all this like turf wars of, you know, this neighborhood versus that neighborhood and all that nonsense.
Yeah.
So basically, I ended up in a lot of violence from that. You know, exposed to violence from Lebanon and terrorism, etc. So I'm not really intimidated by David Davis sitting there with his Ray-Ban glasses, trying to give me what we call in our military the distance conversation. You know, trying to act like a drill sergeant. And so my brother and I kind of quickly pick up to what's happening, and we're both kind of like, all right, yeah, cool. You know, we can do that. You know, like you know, everything you're saying, you know, we could do that. And he just was like scratching his head, you could tell, right? You know, just kind of like, I really put on the hardest performance on these kids. You know, I did the drill sergeant routine. I did, you know, and it's not just an acting routine. I mean, the guy legit was in the Marines, and he knows what it's like to be, you know, beaten down. And here he's trying to scare these two teenagers. And I'm 13, like, he's 11.
That's better than what I've got at the moment.
Exactly. And we're just kind of like, yeah, we could do all that. And the irony is, I didn't want any of the other options. I didn't want a foster family. I didn't want the kibbutz. I didn't want the boarding school. I didn't want any of those options. I turned everything down to the social workers. For some weird reason I can't explain, his weird offer, and it was a weird offer, right? I mean, it's like, hey, you want to stay here with a bunch of drug addicts in like almost like a military kind of rules and regulations? And I'm going, yeah, sure, we could do that. And it's like, why did I say yes to that? I have no clue.
Yeah.
But it felt right to me, and basically, they kind of mulled over the idea. We went back home. And then shortly after that, Tony tells us, you know what? They agreed that they're going to take you guys in. Pack your bags. I'll come and get you on whatever day. And I remember we moved there shortly before Israel independence, 1994, because I'll never forget. They had like a special barbecue, American style. Right, so they had like the sweet beans, if anybody knows, the coleslaw, and the grill out with the barbecue sauces and all stuff. You know, the stuff that
Okay, I've probably seen it in a movie somewhere, but I just don't relate to it.
Yeah,
I know the South African braaivleis and
right. So it is a very typical American cookout. Versus Israeli, which again is
put a bunch of hot dogs on the grill.
Right, exactly, which is very different. And so I remember just thinking to myself, like, wow, this place is so weird. It's like this little like island of like America, kind of in the influence and the people there. A lot of them are American expats.
I assume at this point you speak a better Hebrew than English.
Yeah, exactly. Oh yeah, way better. And so. My English is horrible, right? Or my American, technically, because I know the British wouldn't really consider what I speak to be English. But yeah, I mean, my English isn't very, very great. It's mostly what we learn from the TV, watching on cable, movies and whatever, and the little that we spoke at home, which again, our home situation wasn't very strong. We were mostly on the street 24/7, basically, practically. And so yeah, we start to plug in there, and for me that was a very good experience because, let me put it like this: like, a lot of people talk about peace in the Middle East, right? They talk about Jews and Arabs getting along, right? As this utopic idea, but in reality, you don't really get exposed to anything like that almost ever, right? Most Israelis. I mean, that I think is a good assessment. Of what we get to experience. Yeah. And again, I'm excluding, of course, what we see on the streets here because it's not an apartheid. We're not in South Africa, back in apartheid days where Jews, Arabs, and whatever segregation. We don't have that. But even though we go to work together, we see each other in society, you don't really hang out, right? Yeah. You don't have a sit down and conversate. We don't eat at the same restaurants per se. We don't, hang out in the same, playing soccer or whatever. Haifa is a little bit different like that. In Haifa, you have more interaction with Muslim Arabs and Christian Arabs, right? And in this rehab, it's like I'm actually seeing, like I said, we had a Fatah guy, we had Christian Arabs, we had Russians, we had regular Israelis. Like I said, one of them was a soccer player, a good friend of mine, before he OD'd. So you had like this mix of people, right, that were kind of forced to live together because of their circumstance. Right. And I'm basically experiencing their point of view, their perspective, right, as a very strong Zionist, for one, because that's how my father raised me. So he transmitted that value, and Kiryat Shmona is also kind of naturally more of a Zionistic,
because it's right on the border.
It's right on the border. We can't play, we don't have the luxury of having the Tel Aviv and or the Haifa kind of worldview of, let's just have peace with our Arab neighbors, yeah, no matter what. We didn't really have that luxury. Yeah, we understood very well what the desire of our Arab neighbors were, and unfortunately still is. If we look at Syria right now, for example, we look at what we've had from Gaza, we look at what...
But although, you say that, like you had an increased consciousness of what was going on over the border, But ironically,
Yeah.
it was exactly the opposite in the Gaza envelope. Because the kibbutzim around Gaza were the most left-wing, the most shalom achshav kind of people who were going and specifically helping people from Gaza to come and find work in Israel and being. Yeah.
Well, first of all, the communities surrounding Gaza were different for many reasons, right? So I grew up under Hezbollah terrorism, right? Syria terrorism, firing rockets into Kiryat Shmona and the whole of the north there. So we understood the threat. We understood the constant, any moment, these guys are going to invade or war will break out or whatever. And that happened.
It was the same thing in Gaza. They were sending...
Well, no.
Yeah.
Gaza, on the other hand, Gaza is a completely different world. And this a lot of people don't know. And I learned this from the time when I used to live in the southern communities, by the way. We spent 5 years living in one of those communities by the Gaza envelope. And so that's where I learned the culture that I didn't know existed in Israel. It used to be in the 70s, 80s, 90s, the Jewish community or the people from Israel that were living in the Gaza envelope area, they would go and buy in Gaza fish and certain produce that they had of value that you couldn't get in Israel. And vice versa, the Gazans would come into Israel and buy produce and goods that you couldn't get in Gaza. So there was a complete exchange of goods, of culture. You would hang out on the beaches there.
Right.
Israelis would hang out, it was totally normal.
Right.
What changed is Hamas, is Al-Qaeda, is Islamic extremism via Iran that pumped Gaza with extremists. And those terrorist extremists, through years of propaganda and brainwashing, created what we have today in Gaza, which is a completely different picture.
Right.
Basically, every Gazan today, and this is my experience, post October 7th versus pre-October 7th, my first experience going and operating in Gaza when Israel was in the Gaza Strip. We had Jewish communities and all that, versus 20 years later, what we saw on October 7th.
Right.
So I can tell you both from a combat experience as well, I could see that huge shift within the Gazan communities because we knew which people were normal, which families were wanting peace, were wanting collaboration, all that, and they detested the terrorists, right? But again, after 20 years of the pullout from Gaza, it completely shifted and completely changed, and then we have what we have today. So in any case, so for me, it wasn't that. I mean, I grew up with terrorism. I grew up knowing what my Arab neighbors wanted. They clearly told it to us, and they also, not just in word, but also in action. And so here I am in Haifa, and I'm seeing for the first time, a real coexistence with these guys. And again, because they don't really have much choice, right? Because of the rehab. And then you start to see them breaking down their barriers from each other, their prejudices, their hatred towards each other, and all this stuff. And I remember for me, that was just a very big turning point of, like I said, the way I grew up, and like when I see an Arab, I'm like, I want nothing to do with those people, right? Yeah. Whereas I'm sitting down having dinner, breakfast, lunch, hanging out with these people, and it's like, oh, they're not that bad, you know what I mean? It's like, you know what? Salim is a pretty good guy, Marwan is a pretty good dude, they had, they had chosen drugs or alcohol, and they're ended up here, for stupid decisions they made. Some of them would tell their stories, some didn't. But you got the idea that, like, hey, at the end of the day, they're all human beings. They all have the same values. They all have kids at home. Almost all of them, at least, had kids that they were concerned about, a wife, and so on, right? So you realize, like, there were these shared values, and it just gave me a completely different perspective than, again, your normal Israeli who had grown up in a predominantly Israeli or Jewish community or Christian or Muslim, right? Because we all have our communities and we stick there. But I was kind of forced to kind of see the look outside as well.
Yeah.
Shortly after that time period, we only spent about 4 months there, I think it was, we ended up being invited by the couple that ran the rehab and said, would you like to be with us as in foster care until your family situation squares up? So shortly after that, we ended up into foster care with the Davises. And that's how basically we start a new chapter in our life for my brother-in-law. Myself and my brother.
Yes.
And that was kind of like a new phase for us, completely. I mean, from Kiryat Shmona, like I said, to a new life in Haifa.
And they became your foster parents, and basically that's where you stayed thereafter.
Until I got married. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. My family situation did not get better. My mom died just before we got married, my wife and I. So she died very young from Legionnaires. At this time, my parents were taken back to the U.S. from taken care of from their family. Each one of the family basically took responsibility for each one of their, if the brother or uncle or whatever. But in my dad's case, he was in the care of his sister, and my mom, she just moved to be with her family and basically live more independent. My dad had to live in assisted living because he had destroyed himself so badly from the alcohol. And he was much older than my mom as well. I think they had about a 14 or something plus year gap between them. But in which case, my mom dies in 1990. We get married in 2000, my wife and I. I married and met a Swedish girl who was an au pair to a family in Haifa. And that's how we ended up connecting and meeting. And then my wife and I end up getting married in 2000 and then moving to the United States to start Bible school where I was going to study Christian theology. So
whereabouts did you move to?
Pensacola, Florida. So I moved to Pensacola, Florida. I was going to be near my dad. I made a special request to get leave from the IDF. They told me, you're not going to get a special request. I said, okay, fine.
You were serving in the army at the time?
No. I had gone through my first tzav, my first it's your pre-military checkup. They do a physical, they do the whole thing,
right? And
they basically determine where you're going to serve and give you your due date. So I have a due date. I'm told that I'm not going.
But hang on, you were like 20 years old at the time.
19.
19.
Yeah.
And you got married at age 20.
19.
And also at 19.
19. Yeah. So that same year that I was supposed to get married was the same year I was supposed to get recruited.
Right.
And this is 1999. Sorry, I got married in 2000. My bad. And I was I had a due date for recruitment in 99. So what happened was I went to the recruitment office, or not recruitment office, but what we call Ktsinair, and basically go there and I make my plea and say, listen, my mom had just passed away. I would like to be next to my dad. He's an old gentleman from like World War II, he's living in assisted living, and I want to be next to him and do my last respects, because God forbid, he dies over in America, and I'm over here doing my military service and whatever and can't leave. So I actually requested a year leave, like an extension from my recruitment. Right. They said take a hike. We don't do that. At this time, there's a lot of Israelis. There are refuseniks. They're trying to get out of serving in the military. It's the second Intifada breaking out.
Yeah.
So a lot of kids are trying to get out of their service. Me, on the contrary, I'm a pure Zionist. I want to be in the most elite unit there is in the military. I have a completely different mindset and a completely different motive, but that just didn't fly with them. Long story short is we got a lawyer who used to be the head lawyer of that office for the military. So he knew the rules in and out. And he looked at my case, and he was like apparently a history geek. And he just goes, oh yeah, I know about that. I know about the American thing. Yeah, I know about that. I'm like, how do you know all this stuff? And finally he goes, it's a no-brainer. He says, you're not Jewish. You're not a citizen I mean,
Well, you're not a citizen?
No,
you
I'm
were
not.
born in Israel, but you didn't get a...
Yes, I had Toshav Keva. So I wasn't even a citizen yet. And I was so naive and ignorant to the law, I didn't even realize that at the age of 18, I could have requested citizenship, by the way, is how it works, with the status I was living here.
Right.
So, again, I had no clue. I was just so naive to how things worked, right?
Right.
And ironically, because I didn't request citizenship out of my ignorance,
Yes.
they had no right to hang on to me for military service, was the bottom line. And so he wrote a really nice letter to the office, and I get a letter back saying, your recruitment is terminated,
Right.
period. And I go, okay, I didn't really want that, but we'll deal with this later, you know.
If you want to come back later and serve,
Yeah.
you'll deal with that later.
Yeah, we'll deal with this later.
Yeah.
So so I go to the U.S., like I said, in 2000, start my theological studies in a evangelical school, and I'm like really frustrated with a lot of the content in the school, because my mindset is thinking more Jewish, and the answers they're giving me about theology, God, what have you, is classic Christian theology, which is more not so much about what we do, but how we think. It's all about having the right theology. It's not necessarily about how you live your life.
It's about faith rather than action.
No,
Or no.
it's and it's kind of funny because Christians don't really see that. I mean, what I'm saying right now, for Christians listening to this, you know, oh, that's not true. It's, you know, of course it's about how we live. Yeah, it's about how you live, but it's also, and more so, and anybody who's been to Bible school knows this, it's all about figuring out which theology fits you, embracing that theology, teaching that theology at church, at whatever, but they don't really have, I'll put it like this, Christians don't have halakha,
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah, I've come across that before.
Yeah, right. Okay, so I think Jews understand it more than the Christians do. Like Christians are going to get a little offended about hearing this. I get it.
Right.
I was there too.
There's no Shulchan Aruch.
There's no Shulchan Aruch. There's no, you know,
Yes.
but there is stuff like, well, Jesus said, turn the other cheek, and here's the catch. Shulchan Aruch is going to say, Chad Shtayim Shalosh, the end. This is the final conclusion. This is how we do things.
Yeah.
The end. Now, there's going to be, of course, in the Jewish world, there's going to be different opinions on how to practice the bottom line, right, of the halakha. But we all agree this is the halakha, one way or other, yeah? If you're conservative Judaism or Reform, at the end of the day, you know this is the halakha, right? If I understand correctly.
No, I mean, conservative and reform kind of reject halakha.
Do
They
they really reject it all the way?
I mean, look, there are going to be subtleties. Obviously, conservative is like, you know, a little closer to orthodoxy, but do they accept the divinity of Torah? I don't know. Do they accept Torah Sheba'al Peh? No, they do not.
Interesting. Okay.
And
So I always assumed they believed it. They just don't necessarily believe in the interpretation of the Orthodox way or what have you.
I mean, that's our whole halacha, our whole basis of halacha is rabbinic Judaism. That's what
Correct.
we do. And if you're rejecting the Torah Sheba'al Peh that tells you like what are tefillin. I mean, how do you know what tefillin are unless you put Torah Sheba'al Peh?
Correct.
So
they don't believe in Tushba.
No.
Really?
Interesting. I don't think they do. No, because that. If you did, then they would be keeping halakha. They would be, you know, you wouldn't be changing halakha according to, well, you know, the latest trend is that men and women sit together when you pray.
Yeah.
Okay, so then we should do that, you know, because that's what people do. You know, if you got a halakha, you say, I don't care what people do. We have our morals and our halakha that stays the same.
Correct.
And you know, you have to come up with, you know, when new things are developed, when new technologies happen, and you have to deal with, like, how do you deal with electricity? How do you deal with time zones, which was never an issue before.
Right.
How do those are things that we have to grapple with because they're new information. What would you do if you had to go into space? How would you daven in space? Okay, nobody in Shulchan Aruch ever asked that question.
Right. When the sun's coming up over and over and over in a few.
Right. Every few minutes you're getting sunrise, sunset, putting on your tefillin, taking off your tefillin. It's like,
it should be interesting.
Yeah.
I'm okay. So I'm more interpreting what I've heard from doing security for those kind of groups.
Right.
Typically, they're not going to say that they don't believe in. What I've heard them tell me is more like they interpret it differently or whatever. But in any which case, there is a baseline, I would say, in Judaism, which is the halakha, right? I mean, that's like the foundation.
If you're talking about Orthodox Judaism, then yes.
Yes. Which is what mainstream Judaism has been historically for centuries, right?
Yeah.
So that's your baseline. Let's forget modern Judaism and where we are today, which, yeah, that's debatable and there's different, But in Christianity, right, there isn't a baseline like halakha that we can all agree on. If you're Sephardic or Ashkenazi or Yemenite or what have you, there isn't a baseline. Yeah.
What do you mean there isn't a baseline?
You don't have halakha in Christianity.
In Christianity,
yes, in Christianity,
right, okay.
You don't have an halakha.
Yes.
Yeah. What you have is denominations, and every denomination has a different what they call theology.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a difference of how we interpret, for example, the divinity of Christ. So that theology is going to differ with different denominations. Yeah.
Yeah.
But there isn't a halakha of tefillin or blessing after meals. We don't have that in the Christian.
I mean, I've seen like people saying grace and for what we are about to receive. May the Lord make us
but it's
truly
not an
thankful.
halakha. You know what I'm saying? It's not. You know what I'm saying? We're like in Judaism, it's an halakha. In Christianity, in its origin, it derived Jewish halakha that then later broke down in the diaspora, so to speak, that became the Christian world, and then that split into different denominations, and each one kind of split up into different ideas, different interpretations, and what have you.
Right.
So the long story short of all of that is basically, it really kind of bothered me that the professors did not all agree on a certain theology on whatever they were teaching us. And I'm like, I don't understand. Like, this professor believes in the rapture. This one believes in pre-trib. This one believes in post-trib, for example. Throw out another example. And I'm just like, my head's spinning. I'm like, can you just give me the answer of what it is we believe?
Can you get a coherent story together, please?
Right. And they're like, and they were just respectfully and nicely saying, no, that's for you to decide. And I'm like, okay. I don't know what I want to decide on some of these. Some of these are bigger than me. These are great. These are ideas that it's over my head.
But it's interesting that like by saying that,
yeah,
they're kind of saying, well, it actually doesn't really matter.
No, it does matter. That's the irony. It does matter. It just doesn't matter which you choose. That's up to you. So in a way, it's cool. It's cool like that. Like, unlike like in Orthodoxy, like we were just saying, we're going to say, well, no, it's not cool to have women do tefillin. No, we're not cool with that, right? Mm-hmm. But in Christianity, in a way, it's like saying, oh, if you want to have women do that, well, we frowned on that. This mainstream denomination that we're in, whatever, like one of the big ones. But if you want to do that, hey, start your own denomination and have women do tefillin, for example, would be the answer in Christianity. Right. Judaism is kind of less like that. And so, in any case, that was my experience. That was my frustration with the kind of like the theology that was kind of thrown at me. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go back to Israel. The 9/11 attacks just happened. To me, that was kind of like the final straw that broke the camel's back of just months of trying to make it through my studies while hearing of friends of mine who either were murdered in terrorist attacks or had been on a bus that had just blown up, but just moments before it got off. And it was getting too hard to bear to be in this environment while Israel's at war, kind of thing.
Yeah, and your heart is still there.
Yeah, I was like, I can't keep doing this. So I was literally in my last semester, and I remember going to the head of the school, and I said, I really feel I need to go back to Israel, and sorry, and I just want you to know, like, respectfully, it's not like I don't like the school. I actually liked the school. Everything was great. This dilemma I'm telling you about, like my having my struggles, whatever, that was more internal in my mind, in myself, and just discussions with my wife or close friends, not necessarily, me telling the professors, I don't like your answer. It was more me going in my head, I don't like that answer, right? And it's something that just it wouldn't sit with me. Right. Like it did with most of the other Christian kids who they had a denominational background that they grew up in. If it was Assemblies of God, if it was non-denominational, whatever it was, they had like a baseline for themselves, right? I came with nothing. I had no clue what my dad taught or believed or whatever, right? As far as my biological parents, I knew what my foster parents believed, but I wanted to find my truth, my way. Really is what was I was searching for. And that was my disappointments of some of the answers I got. So when I came back here...
So you decided at this point that you're going to come back to Israel.
Come back to Israel and then start my military service.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we moved back to Israel. At this time it's about 2002. The peak of the Second Intifada. And I approached the recruitment office and basically let them know my intentions, which is to cancel my leave of service and have them reinstitute my mandatory service call-up.
Did you take out citizenship at this point?
No. I still didn't know anything about the citizenship issue, is the irony. Because in my mind, like I said, I knew that we lived in Israel on a different status than most Israelis, and I just kind of accepted it as that's just the way it is for us, right? Mm-hmm. I didn't, like I said, I wasn't, we didn't have the internet back then. You didn't, unless you knew someone who knew.
The internet did exist technically, but it wasn't like what it is today.
It wasn't what it is today. I'll put it that way. Yes,
yeah.
And I was not at all, and that's the other funny thing is in contrast to my work today. I had zero involvement with computers. I was an athlete. I was somebody who worked with his hands. I never spent almost any time on the internet except for doing research for my papers, which I hated. So ironically, I didn't see the internet as the answer to my problems. Hey, Siri, tell me da-da-da-da, right? I didn't have that. So I really didn't know that about my status was the irony, and that literally all I had to do was basically request to get citizenship.
Yeah.
I end up getting my call up. I get a new date for 2003, and they actually called in my wife because they're like, "Wait, you want to be in combat?" And I said, "Yeah, of course I want to be in combat."
But you have a wife.
And they're like, "But you have a wife."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Yeah, and?" And so they just looked at me like,
and your wife was cool with this.
Oh yeah. And so they said, "Where's your wife?" I said, "She's outside. She doesn't have a call up." And so they called her in, questioned her, told her about the crazy thing that her husband's trying to do, get into a combat unit. And when they saw that she was in agreement, they were like, "Well, if that's what you want to do, good luck." Mm. And so I basically got my request minus Special Forces. I really wanted to be in Special Forces, but because of my social status, that actually prevented me from trying out for the Special Forces community, which I didn't know at the time. So I'm already doing pre-military training. I run into a good friend of mine today, but at the time, we just ran into each other while he's torturing these young kids, making them crawl through mud, do all kinds of crazy stuff through weeds and rocks and whatever. I'm like, and at this time we're living up on the Golan Heights, so like these boulders and all that, and I'm just like, what the heck is this? And he goes, oh yeah, this is pre-military training. He goes, what are you doing? I was like, I thought I was doing pre-military training. I'm running on the track here, you know? And he's just like, he says, well, if you wanted, he says, well, where do you want to go? And I told him the name of the unit. And he goes, I used to be an officer there. And I said, really? I said, so then you know what it takes to be there, right? And he goes, yeah. So I started joining his group of kids. And then I ended up
crawling through the mud
in the weeds, and during the peak of the winter, he would make us crawl through and actually go into the water streams. They were coming off the Golan Heights there, and crawling into that frigid water and come out the other end, and just crazy stuff like that.
Right.
You know, kicking you and, you know,
semi-torturing you,
building up your resilience. And then I did the same thing independently when we went on vacation to Sweden. So this time it's in like minus 20 degrees, I think.
So, and then you're going ice swimming and
no, I'm running out in the snow. So I'm going out there running across a frozen lake, for example, and then just continuing my physical regiment while trudging through snow, basically, right? I'm still getting in the same kilometers. I'm still doing the stuff. Just the conditions are a little bit harsher, right? And so I just saw it as a challenge, of course. I mean, for me, it was like, hey, you know, why not, you know? And then he grilled me when I came back, right? He goes, you didn't do the diet. You didn't do the exercise. I said, of course I did. Like, why do you think I want to do it? And he's just like, you're lying, you know? And I was just like, I'm going to punch you in the face, you know? It's like, of course I did it, you know? And again, he was just playing mental games with me and getting me prepared for that whole reality. Then I get the bitter news that I can't join. I can't, because the way it works here is we do tryouts. And if you don't get sent to the tryouts, then clearly you can't try out, and therefore you can't potentially make it to where you want to. So in my case, I didn't even get a chance to try. And that's what just stung so hard. So I basically consulted with him and I said, what's the next best thing?
Why didn't they accept you?
Because I wasn't Jewish. I wasn't Jewish and I was married. So I had 2 strikes against me, basically. So he joked with me, he says, well, if you get a divorce and go through conversion, then you can fulfill your dream. I said, take a hike. I said, that's not going to happen. That was my answer. And so, any case, because I was about, also being honest. And I'm like, that's ridiculous. Why would I convert if I don't believe in Judaism? I mean, that's so stupid, you know. and so basically, he tells me that the next best thing would be Givati. And I was like, really? I was like, what's Givati? I mean, I've heard of Golani, I've heard of Tzarchanim, which was another offer that he said, you know, if you want to be cool, you know, go to the Tzarchanim, you know, they're like the cool unit. And the paratroopers, right? I mean, who doesn't want to have a red beret? And he says, but, you know, the ones who are doing the hard work right now are the ones fighting in Gaza. And he says, my former commander of my unit, he's going to be the next head of Givati. And I just did my math and I went, well, if I'm going to at least get to serve under a guy who served in the unit that I was shooting for, then that's the next best thing for me, plus the combat experience of Gaza, then why not? So that's what led me towards that path. I ended up getting what I requested. It was actually, again, it's like my whole military career is ironically kind of like this, is basically me having to fight to do the hardest combat when them constantly trying to push me down. So I had to fight to start my service again. I had to fight to cancel it. I had to fight to get into Givati because they asked my wife in because they were going to send me to be a jobnik. And I'm like, I don't want to be a jobnik. And then when I got to the Bakum, they literally withheld me from getting on the bus with all the guys who were going to Givati. So I actually joined about a week or so later.
They held you for the bus because?
For some stupid reason, they had some. It was like a record mistake or whatever. So even though they green lighted and okayed at the main recruitment that yes you get your wish, when I got to the Bakum, they somehow, I fell through the cracks, and they said, well, you have to see a kaban, a psyche guy. And I was like, why do I need to see a kaban? Like, what the heck? Like, you people are crazy. And so anybody who knows military bureaucracy in Israel, you'll know what I'm talking about. So the irony is, I basically protest, and I said, I'm not going to be a jobnik. I am a volunteer, legit. I don't have to be here, and there's no way I'm going to spend 3 years not fighting and fighting for my country. So I go through the hoops. I do what they asked me to do, and I'm fighting to get to Givati. And finally, they're like, "Fine, go to Givati," And so I join up the young recruits about a week later. I get to the Givati base, and I tell my wife, I was like, "Oh, I finally got to," I was so happy. I was like, and I was just smiling, and like constantly, like we're standing in threes, and I'm constantly just smiling from just elation of, thank you, God, I finally got what I wanted, because it was such a battle just to get there. And the commanders were like, "What are you smiling about? Give me push-ups," So I literally did more push-ups for smiling than for being disobedient. In fact, I don't think I ever got a punishment for being disobedient. Is the irony. But I got punishments for smiling, for being happy.
Well, that's a good thing to have in your record.
Right. And I remember the other guys were like, "What the heck's wrong with you?" And I was like, "Do you know?" Like, it was like you couldn't express it in
You're
words.
also a little bit older than most of the recruits.
Oh yeah, I'm 22 years old.
Right, and they're 18.
I'm actually older than the platoon commander.
Right.
And so it's like, how do you express to people that this has been your childhood dream, was to be in combat? Okay, I don't get to be in special forces, so that's a dream that I had to die to, so to speak, but at least I'm in combat. It's like, you know what I mean? It's just one of those things that, and plus the price I had to pay physically to be where I wanted to be, it's like, dude, we did a lot of very hard training, and I doubled up on the training than the other pre-military training guys. I did the double shifts, right? I paid the guy extra to, like, I think I went in 2 extra days a week, just private with him, where he just went on torture sessions of, beating the crap out of me and getting me.
And you said, "Please, sir, can I have some more?"
I was that guy. And so for me, it just was like, so much sacrifice, and all those hours in the snow, in the frigid, hard conditions of Sweden, up in the mountains there where we lived. We had a vacation home.
Right.
And so it's like, here I'm on vacation with my family. During I think it might have been Christmas or something. I actually can't remember, but it probably was a Christmas vacation with the Swedish family. And here I am not splurging with everybody else, right? Having the nice pies, the nice goodies. I'm sticking to my stringent diet and exercise, and they're like, "Wait, you're gonna go out again? Why don't you just hang out with us? Why don't you?" It's like, no, I want to be in, and I was like super committed, right? And here
a lot of discipline.
Yeah,
because I'm sure that the food was like better than just okay.
Oh yeah. And it's like once in a lifetime kind of deal, right? With your my wife's family, in Sweden, and you don't get to go there every day, whatever. And so, and here I am, with these young recruits, and I'm just elated that I get a chance to be part of the fighting forces to defend the Jewish state.
Yeah.
Like, for me, that was like my biggest dream as a young kid growing up with a dad who fought World War II to defend the Jewish people. Here I get to defend the Jewish state, right? It just was such an honor.
Yeah.
And so, I was that tacky kid. My good friend Evgeny, he makes fun of me. He says, what does he call me? He says, "You're a," he had a name for me.
Chnun?
No. A romantic. Something like that. And I was like, you know what? I'll take that. And so I start my service there. I end up going through boot camp, the whole thing. And in my platoon, we had a group of Beinishim, Bnei Yeshiva.
Yes.
For those who don't know the term,
I know it because my son's a Danish.
you're right. And these kids are just hitting me left and right with all these religious questions because I was this oddball. They're like, "Are you Christian?" "No, I'm not Christian." "You're not Christian? Well, then what are you?" I said, "I believe in the Bible." What Bible? And I'm like, I believe in the from Genesis through Revelation. I'm like, "Well, then you're a Christian." And I'm like, "No, I'm not a Christian." And they're like, "You're not making much sense." Because really, I didn't view myself as a classical Christian, right? And like I said, I went to Bible school trying to figure out what
really
am
spoke
I.
To you, yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, I won't call myself a Christian, right? It's like I have. It's like I feel like I have Jewish family with the Moroccan family that helped raise me. It's like I have their values. I have shared Zionist values that they also implemented into me from the Jewish Zionist. There's a term for it, the builders of the nation, right? I mean, literally, Yaakov was one of those who came here in the early founding of Israel, who literally worked for Solel Bonet to literally build the nation, like physically build it, and was in Golani, and he was in elite operations up in Lebanon. I mean, it's like this guy, he lived for the country, and those values were transmitted to me and only strengthened with what my dad was teaching me as a Christian Zionist who fought World War II. And so I could just not really say, yeah, I'm a Christian, I just didn't view myself as that. And really, I'm just really trying to understand, well, what am I? It's a good question, right? So I'm definitely not Jewish, that I know. None of my family, to my knowledge, have any Jewish heritage at all. There's no, because some families, they'll say, "Oh yeah, we have this, great grandma, she whatever got converted back in, the Spanish Inquisition or whatever." I didn't have any of that.
Right.
Like I knew I was legit not, and so. Basically,
so did they use you as a Shabbos goy?
No, I don't think so. Actually, I don't think so. I don't think we ran into any issues with that.
Yeah.
But what it was is just they kept challenging me, right? And it bugged me. Like originally, it bugged me because remember, I went to Christian theological studies, which the Banishim went to a completely different school, right? They also went to study Jewish theology, Jewish teaching and values.
Right. And they were in Hester, right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
And the way you study in yeshiva is completely different than you do in to become a pastor, right? We don't challenge each other like you do at yeshiva. You don't sit there with the book and say, it says da 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 da. What do you say? And da da da, in the
back and forth and the argument.
And the argument, yeah.
The vociferous argument.
Yeah. None of that. And so that's what I'm saying. And so that really, it was like, it was like I was offended. Like, why are you guys bugging me? What is your deal? Not realizing they were honestly just doing what they're normally doing.
That's what you in the base midrash.
Right.
Right. You're going in and you're arguing and trying to say, like, justify your position. They understand.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not an aggressive thing. It's just like, I want to get the emes. What's the truth over here? What are you saying?
Exactly.
I want to understand what you're saying.
Exactly. And so in my ignorance and not knowing that, I finally got really tired with this one kid who saw me eating the pita druzi on Pesach. Mm-hmm. And he goes, "Doron, it's Pesach. Why are you doing that?" And I said, "I'm respecting the dude who just, offered this to me."
You were called Doron at the time.
No. It doesn't matter what the name is.
Yeah, I know, but you were going by an English name.
I had a biblical name, a Hebrew name, actually.
Right.
And that's part of my middle name.
Right.
In my Tuzat Zut today still.
Right.
By the way. So
you got challenged about the pita.
Yeah, and he goes, what are you doing eating the, and I was just like, what? And I said, that's all rabbinic nonsense anyways, the thing about the unleavened bread on Pesach. And he just looked at me and goes, boy, this guy's a moron kind of look. And he goes, it's in the Bible, read it. And he literally, and I remember he's an Ashkenazi kid, so he got real red in the face and just walked away, and I could tell he was pissed and he was hurt by my, flippant, ignorant attitude and answer.
But he knew you weren't Jewish.
Yeah.
So why was he offended that you were eating?
No, he was
pellets?
offended at my answer.
Oh, I see.
Right? He was offended at what I
But
said.
why even challenge you in the beginning, even knowing that?
I don't know. Because I'm trying to find my way, kind of thing, right?
Right.
And I think he knew enough to know, like, well, you're saying that you want to respect what the Bible says, but that's what the Bible says, idiot, kind of thing. You know, is don't eat unleavened bread for Pesach.
Right.
And I remember I went and I got my little small travel Bible that had been given from my in-laws as a gift to have for my deployments for the military. So like a very small, thin paper. And I'm like, okay, let's go to the 5 books of Moses. I know it's somewhere in there.
Somewhere in there.
I had no clue even where. And I'm looking, and good thing is in the Christian Bibles, you'll have what they call headers. So the header basically tells you the context of what you're about to read. Okay. It kind of gives you the skinny. It's like a title.
Okay.
Yeah, which you don't have in the Torah, right?
Of course. Yeah.
And you don't have in a Chumash and what have you. And so this is something that Christians have, which is pretty cool. It's like a cheat. Yeah. And so that's what I'm doing. I'm looking for headers because I literally don't even know where it is. And finally I get to the part where it says the commandments for Passover. I go, okay, here we go. And so I start reading it and I go, and you know, there's a few passages about Pesach. It's not just one place. Yeah, but the one that I read said, "This is the Passover. You're to eat unleavened bread. Da 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 da. And whoever doesn't do this will be cut off from my people." And I remember when I read the words "cut off from my people," that just struck me like a sword, just pierced me, because I was like, ugh.
You're reading an English translation.
English translation.
Yeah.
And I'm gutted.
Yeah.
I'm gutted by those words, right? I go, dang. It's like, okay, I'm not Jewish, but I am part of God's people here in Eretz Yisrael, right? Is how I viewed myself.
Right.
And I'm like, so my interpretation of that, was, whoa, like I literally just cut myself away from God's people by belittling the command of something as simple as unleavened bread, right? And it was like, and this isn't a rabbinic makeup. This wasn't some fence that was added, centuries later. This is like God's word. He literally says it in black and white. And I'm like, it floored me, and I didn't know what to do with it. I was like, why didn't they teach me this in Bible school? I'm like,
I was just about to ask you that question.
So I'm like a mixture of like anger, frustration, right? And like, why didn't everybody? Why? I mean, I have some of the smartest people in the Christian world considered to be, especially in what they call Near Eastern languages. That was their specialty. Is some of the people, professors in my Bible school, and I'm like, and yet they kind of missed this kind of foundational command, because remember in Christianity it's all about the theology, and the mainstream theology of Christianity for most of Christendom is that the Torah is done away with. And so therefore, and this is why most Christians don't look at the Torah as God's commandments to us. And therefore, they also don't look at the Noahide laws as the laws for the nations, the non-Jew, either, right? They just don't look at it that way. Ironically, they say, and they claim, we believe in the 10 Commandments. But in the 10 Commandments, you have the keeping of Shabbat, which,
Yeah.
And so there's, it's like, it's kind of like the irony of the irony, but it is just the way it is, right? And so I'm just like, okay, this bugs me, right? And so I put it aside because, again, we're in a combat unit. We don't have time to sit around and do yeshiva brain exercises on what I believe or whatever. So this is simmering inside of me. It's bugging me, right? And of course I go to the kid and I say, hey man, I'm sorry. I think I did. I hope I did. I can't remember. If you're hearing this, I'm sorry. Because that was rude what I said, and it was ignorant, but it was a must for the path that I was on, because it's like his the group probing, wasn't the one kid, but then his probing on the thing of Pesach, it kind of led me on this trajectory of realizing maybe not everything I was taught is necessarily true. And then therefore I need to do my own research and finish what I started when I went to Bible school, to find my truth, what I can receive, right? A few months later, I'd say about a year plus later, give or take, I finished commander school. I go to commander school. I get sent to the first units of the Palchatzim, Home Front Command Search and Rescue. So in 2004, the first platoon of the Search and Rescue units, the Palchatz, was founded, and I was one of the commanders that helped start and was part of that founding platoon. Literally, it was just a platoon, and then there was another platoon, and then another one, and then you end up with a battalion, and it grew, and it is a whole division in the military today. But at that time, it was just a platoon. And so I get sent to the Palchatzim. I'm bitter. I'm angry. I'm like, I signed up to be in combat. What am I doing in Home Front Command? I am not taking off this purple beret. I did.
So you were sent there against your will.
Oh yeah. But it is what it is. It's military orders.
Yeah.
And so everybody sends soldiers from their units to go to commander school, an NCO school. It's not officer school. It's an NCO school. So they send you to go to a commander course, Makim, and every unit has to give an aktsa'ah, okay, I don't know the term in English, but
an allocation.
Yeah, an allocation, right, towards the blanks of the IDF, right, in manpower, where there's gaps. And unfortunately, I think I'd pissed off someone in my where I come from, because I actually argued for the first time, because I was the guy that just did whatever they told me. I never complained about my conditions, my pay, my whatever. But when I went to the commander course, they told me, you're not getting your married pay. You're not getting this condition, that condition. Oh, and by the way, you're actually a chayal boded, because neither of your parents are alive right now. I said, yeah, that's correct. I said, but that makes me a chayal boded. They're like, yeah, moron. Like, I was like, well, I don't know this.
That's a benefit, right?
And it's a benefit, yeah. It's a benefit, yeah. You get certain benefits. And so I was getting robbed of my benefits, and I didn't care, because again, I came in with a volunteer attitude, but there was something of a injustice that really ticked me off, that I was just like, but why? Why would you do that? Well, why don't I just ask them? And by just asking and addressing them, it ticked off the wrong people, basically, is what I feel probably happened, because I had the word of the head of my battalion that I was in, that I'm coming back, and he wants me to come back as a married guy, and he's going to fit me into the battalion in a position that's going to work and whatnot.
What was your wife doing throughout all of this?
She was working. I think she did a few jobs. She worked at a cafe. She worked at some other shop that was selling things.
So how often did you get to go off base to go back and?
That was part of the problem too. Is I didn't get my leave time that I was deserving. So I actually got leave like everybody else, which was maybe a weekend every other week. So every 2 weeks, basically, get a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, you're back on base.
Right.
Leave. And so there's stuff like that I was just like, yeah, I mean, it's like I have a wife at home, and if I can get extra leave, and this was my mindset, and it doesn't affect my fellow soldiers. I'm not taking someone else's leave, right? As long as it's a pure, like, unaffecting the rest, and you can do it, well, hook me up. Like, why not? Like, what's the deal? And it just was what it was, right? I mean, it just, for anybody who knows the military, it's not a perfect system, and I was an oddball on every level possible. So I don't, at the time it made me bitter. Now I'm like, you know what, fair enough. I don't expect these commanders and people to have really understood my position and where I was coming from. And that I was really altruistic in my service. I wasn't looking to take something or get something, from the military, But in any case, so I ended up in the Home Front Command, and I'm like bitter that I'm in this stupid place, right?
You're basically being a jobnik.
No,
Oh, not
no,
really.
it's not Jobnik actually. It's so instead of Rifleman 07, it's a Rifleman 05,
Which means
which basically means the level of the combat qualification of the combat soldier. So, for example, the equivalent of the Home Front Command units, as far as riflemen, it's on the same level as the border policemen in Israel, who are full combat,
right.
right? Or the Kalakal.
But if you're in Homefront Command, you're not seeing action.
Well, that's the thing. You would think, right?
Yeah.
But Home Front Command does see action. So, for example, on October 7th, it was Home Front Command that did a lot of the fighting to stop the terrorists.
Right.
On October 7th. Right? A lot of people don't know about it because nobody really talks about it because they're not a cool unit to highlight.
Right.
And less known. They have less of a legacy, less of a history. Definitely not in combat, right?
Right. All we know about them is they're the guys who sound the sirens when they need to and send us into the mamad, and they're the people who made the rules about Corona.
Right.
or
yes.
implemented
yes.
the rules.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. But that's the Home Front Command. But within the Home Front Command, the big Home Front Command, you have the Palchatzim, which are the operational units who do operations like in basically they'll give them the low level of combat deployments. They actually get combat deployments today. At the time, we didn't have any of that. At the time, because we're founding the unit, we actually were doing we were guarding the high. What do you call it? The max security prisons for the terrorists, right? The highest where they put the baddest terrorists. We were doing security for those prisons at the time before it got transferred to the prison service, which is way more professional in the way they do their work, which is a great move. But during the time when we were there, it sucked because we were doing guard duty, we were doing prisoner transports. Taking them to their hearings, taking them to do their cancer treatments, right? All things that we hear about on the news, right?
Like Sinwar, huh?
Yeah. I mean, because, a lot of people in the media will talk about how they're starving in the prisons, they're being mistreated in the prisons. Well, this is actually something I can talk about because I was there. I saw the prison service. I saw how they were treated. Here's the reality versus what the news will tell you. Reality, their food rations were higher quality chuparim that we didn't get. Okay? They got like milkies. They got nice meats. They got like all the nice trimmings that your soldier did not get. So the ones
that's going to make you really annoyed, isn't it?
Exactly. The ones guarding you are getting a lesser food ration quality than the terrorists in prison. And I remember my soldiers getting pissed and asking me, they're like, sir, because we would guard the food transport as it got off the truck into their living quarters, right, to get processed. So we would guard the transport. And my soldiers are looking at all this food, salivating at the mouth, going, what the, And I'm like, hey, first of all, I said, you know what? The fact that we're treating these prisoners in a better way was the way I could rationalize it and the way I argued it. I disagree with it today, but I just said, that's kind of an honor that Israel, like in other words, an honor. It shows that we're better than they are. That we don't treat them the way they deserve to be treated, right? Today, I completely disagree with that. By the way, and that's how I believed back then.
You got to find some story that keeps you motivated.
Yeah. But I guess it's not like I believed in it as much as I saw the silver lining in it. I saw the silver lining in, this isn't cool. I agree. But I look at myself as a combat soldier who doesn't need milky to keep me going. I just need fuel. As long as you give me the fuel that I need to do my job, that's all I care about. Trimmings is trimmings, man. You know, fancy foods and nasty you're a combat soldier. You don't need that, is my mindset. Because again, I was trained different. I was brought up different. I was brought up in a mindset of like, you need to learn how to suffer. You need to learn how to be a warrior.
And you weren't actively looking for the suffering.
In a way. So
I mean, you went looking for like, please sir, can I have some more? Diving through the mud and the snow and whatever else.
Correct. And even while I was there, I was the one doing the most physical activity and all that, and it just was what it was, you know. And so, but that's the reality. Is the point is, the reality and the irony is, they're getting cancer treatments, they're getting full medical, full everything, full health that Israeli citizens are not getting. Is the reality. Now, I don't know what it is today, but I can tell you what it was. This isn't back in 2004. That I know for a fact.
Yeah.
And that same prison that I'm talking about is the same prison that Musab Hassan Yusuf, the Green Prince, sat in. And it's the same place where he had his revelation that he was on the dark path, that he was on the path of destruction, and that he had the revelation of, if this is how we treat each other in prison, because that's what we did witness. We witnessed brutal treatment of them towards each other. They would rape each other in prison. They would beat each other in prison. They would murder each other in prison simply because they were from the different terrorist factions. So the infighting amongst the terrorists was brutal. One of the dudes that we had to process the what was his remains, the guy was stabbed, and then he was burnt alive
inside the prison, under the watch of the guards. In the prison
7-Eleven style, like where you have all your goodies.
Yeah.
Right? Like the snacks. Like they burnt all that up with him inside of it. Oof. So the dude's like he was a crisp, right? And you're like, whoa, they just did that to one of their own. Yeah? Simply because of,
because of like infighting.
And so Musab Hassan Yusuf sees that, right? And he goes, he has this revelation of like, if this is what my movement's all about, and this is what Islam is all about, I'm out. Yeah. It's a long story short.
Yeah. I've read the Son of Hamas.
Yeah,
I've seen his whole story.
Yeah, but that was his conclusion, right?
Yeah.
And you can concur from what you read in his book, right? And I even know the people that actually maybe or may not have had any process in his arrest, but that's for another day.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like I even heard about his arrest, right? I know like his case, so to speak, not in detail, but just stories that I've heard of operators that were part of nabbing some of these high-profile people, and he happened to be one of them. And so you witness that, right? And it's like, wow, these guys are just, they're messed up. This whole thing is messed up. And then it would really tick me off when I'd see the media saying, oh no, Israel's starving these prisoners. And I'm going, what?
They're starving the soldiers.
Yeah, it's like I have to convince my soldiers why we're not getting the same rations that they are, and you're telling me that they're starving? Like, you chutzpah, right? Yeah. It just so irritated me, of course.
Wow.
But in any case, it was there in Home Front Command that one of my soldiers, she was sent to a course called Nativ, right? A Jewish conversion course. Mm-hmm. So she comes back, and it was a new program actually. In I think it started in 2004. So she was one of the first people to go through it. She comes back and she says, "I hope you don't mind. I submitted your name because they're looking for more people to send through this program." And I was like, "What program? What are you talking about?" And she goes, "Oh, it's this, and you're all into like, God and whatever. And, I think that I thought this would be good for you." And I'm just like, okay,
okay, well, so she judged you right.
Well, yeah, she did. But I honestly, I would have never wanted to or thought to go to a course like that. Because like I said, I had zero interest of conversion at this time. None at all. And I was like, you know what? Where I'm at right now sucks. This prison service sucks. This unit I'm in sucks. We're not getting to do what I signed up to do, which is to catch these bad guys and or eliminate them on the battlefield. Instead, I'm here babysitting these scumbags. I don't want to continue doing this.
Yeah.
If I get 6 months break, and it's actually at the time, I don't know if it is today, but at the time they broke it up into 2-month breaks. So it's a 2-month introductory course, 2 months if you want to continue, and then a final 2 months of kind of really honing in your knowledge of Jewish law and what's required and what you're about to take on yourself. So I start the first 2-month program, and which is basically a taglit. It's taglit with religious studies on the side.
Right.
So lots of touring the country, seeing sites.
Which you possibly hadn't done before.
Which I had, actually.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So I had it because I'd been on Christian tours before.
Okay.
And I'd been involved with that during my service a little bit. And
of course your hashba'ah would have been at the Kotel.
Correct. And I grew up here, So really, that whole part of the program was for the kids who either had a Jewish background and did not grow up in Israel, and it was to kind of connect them with their Jewish roots. And they're not going to continue with the course because they don't need to do conversion. And then the other part of it is again for the Jews, the Israelis who are not Jewish, because the mother's not Jewish, but the father is. So they grew up in a mixed home or a Jewish home, but just the mom's not Jewish, so they're halachically not Jewish, right? Yeah. And so, of course, it's to get them to have a foundation in, your identity and whatever. And also to make it kind of fun a little bit, not just, boring halachic teachings all day long. And actually, those first 2 months, you get to hear the diverse Jewish perspectives. So we had Orthodox teachers, we had conservative teachers, we had like a mix. And I remember the ones that were actually non-Orthodox, they really annoyed me. I was just like, what kind of junk is this? It's like they're saying that, that there's no much difference between Judaism and different ideas in the world. They're talking about like in Africa, they also had stories of the flood or in blah, blah. And I was like, this sounds a lot like the crap that I heard in my
theological studies.
No, in my art studies, because I went to an art school in Haifa.
Okay.
I was like, I had an argument with my Bible teacher, and where she made the same claim, and I actually refused to answer her tests, to answer the answers that she wanted on a biblical question. I was like, if you're going to ask me a question on the Bible, I'll tell you what the Bible says. I'm not going to tell you what the mythology of the similar story says, because I don't believe that. And I was like, and that's not Bible, is what I argued with her. Yeah. And so I just looked at these guys as in the same way, and I was just like, that's nice. I've heard this before, and sorry, but I don't prescribe to that idea. So good luck with good luck with your future, kind of thing. But the ones that were more, they were more religious, and were teaching, the actual Jewish halacha. I was like really connecting with those teachers. And I was really connecting with the truth behind what they were teaching. I'm like, okay, that's truth. That's biblical truth, and that's biblical truth. I can't refute that, and I can't refute that. And then I'm like, you know what? I think I'm going to keep Shabbat. So that was like my first step of like changing my lifestyle, coming home on break. And I tell my wife, I said, from now on, we're doing Shabbat. And she's like, what? She's like, but we're not Jewish. I said, yeah, I know. I said, but we're doing Shabbat. and I, of course, I explained, my convictions and how I'm starting to understand, have these new understandings, new revelations that are really impacting me. And I'm like, the least we can do is keep Shabbat. I mean, come on, what's the big deal? I'm not saying we're gonna like.
Shabbat's quite a big deal, actually.
I know. But I mean, clearly, I'm not talking about like electricity and this and that and the whole of, all the melachot of Shabbat you're not gonna do. But I'm like, let's just have a challah, let's just have a kiddush.
Light candles.
Light candles. And I'm not going to travel on Shabbat, right?
Right.
Maybe. I'm not going to maybe do a grill out or something on Shabbat. I don't know. Like, let's find ways to just set this day aside differently than we have been up till now. and again, remember, I have a baseline with basically Sephardic, Edot HaMizrach, Judaism, growing up in Kiryat Shmona. So I have a baseline. I've been to the synagogue. I've done the, I've done the ceremony at home. But again, those aren't Orthodox Jews. Even though one of their daughters is Orthodox today, that's not how the family was, right? They were definitely keeping kosher and definitely religious and go to synagogue, but it wasn't how to say they're not living a religious lifestyle, and they wouldn't be considered Orthodox. Yeah.
Well, I think when it comes to Sephardim, it's a very different thing because Sephardim are always Orthodox. It's like obviously it's a broad generalization.
Sure.
But the Sephardim are very, very fiercely traditional, and
correct.
And they might not keep all of the halachot.
Exactly.
But if they're going to keep something, they're going to keep it, and
exactly.
and they know like the mezuzah, and they know and they'll kiss the mezuzah, and they'll put on tefillin every day, even if they're eating whatever. It's just like there's a certain connection that the Sephardim have that they didn't lose, which the Ashkenazim the Ashkenazim got badly affected by the Haskalah, the Enlightenment,
correct.
With all the stuff that was happening in Europe, whereas in the Arab lands that was not happening.
Exactly. So it's that kind of form of Judaism. Again, it's more for whoever understands the context. You get it. If you don't, you don't. I mean, it's hard to explain, but again, we're not talking about Ma'asharim style Judaism, yeah?
Yeah.
Or what we have in like Bet Shemesh, let's say, or whatever.
Well, Bet Shemesh is a big mix.
Yeah.
It's a big mix of different types.
But okay, not ultra Orthodox, yeah?
Yeah.
to be really, because again, it's definitely very traditional. It's definitely very conservative in I mean, they would never eat something unkosher of any kind. I mean, not even explore for the fun of it. Yeah. Which is also how I kind of, even my taste was like that. Even though I lived in the States, in fact, I think only during the Bible school time was when I kind of explored with eating unkosher. It was the kind of the irony. When I moved back to Israel, I don't recall ever really being drawn to a cheeseburger or having bacon and that kind of stuff. I didn't go out of my way looking for, that one shop that sells.
Hey, if some pita turned up over Pesach.
Exactly, right? So it was kind of even funny because it even influenced kind of my, my palate, I guess you could say, yeah? So that was actually the easy part. The whole kosher thing was kosher's not easy. Let me rephrase that. Kosher's not easy. It's kind of rocket science, but but as far as any heartbreak on not ever having a cheeseburger again or whatever, to me that wasn't a big deal, right? Having pork, that wasn't a big deal. It wasn't, like I said, or shellfish. I mean, I was never interested in that stuff. It grossed me out, actually. But ironically, in Bible school, I actually worked at a place called the Oyster Bar, and I would shuck oysters, like, by the hundreds. And I was like, this stuff is so freaking gross. Like, I can't believe people are eating this. But it was a job. And that's the closest I got to shellfish. I never, and like my buddy's like, you sure you don't want, like, and like, they're like, dude, this is like, how expensive this is? You sure you don't want this? I'm like, no, I don't want it. Like, not at all.
You couldn't pay me to eat it.
So again, to make a long story short, really that's what started the path for my wife and I to go through Jewish conversion, which we then continued actually outside the military, because I was like, again, I'm in the military. I don't have time for theology and trying to understand all these deep things and literally change my whole lifestyle. We're going to put this on the back burner. And then when I get out of my military service, I'm going to take at least a year and then do a deep dive of Jewish studies, halakha, read, what's it called, weekly Torah portion, what do you call it?
Parshat HaShavua.
But yeah, but read also the commentaries
Rashi, right.
and I mean really dig in and really start to really apply myself 100% into Jewish studies, so that if this is really a path that we're going to choose, then I know what I'm taking on myself. I fully understand what I'm taking on myself, and I'm not just doing it to get a stamp in my Teudat Zehut, because I really could care less about that. I'm married to a Gentile. I'm a Gentile. We're good to go, right? In other words, and at this point, I'm already also a citizen, which this is where I discovered the citizenship issue, because I get an invite from the Misrad HaPnim to come in and swear allegiance to Israel and become a citizen. And the guy who swears me in, I believe he was like a Druze guy, and I remember thinking of how comedic this was. It's like, here is this like super Zionist kid who grew up in northern Israel, and I'm being sworn in as a citizen of Israel by a Druze, who I'm not even sure if he's Druze or Arab or what, but it's like, he's got the accent, he's not Jewish. And I just thought, this is so bizarre, right? Yeah. And again, a lot of things that people, assume about Israel, but don't realize what Israel really is, right? What a multicultural country we are. And we have citizens of, all races and religions. And here is a dude, like I said, he's not Jewish, but he's swearing a dude into, to become Israeli. And that's after a year of military service. It's just automatic, actually, and so that's how I get my citizenship automatic. My wife as well. We then that was a whole other story, of course. But again, we finally got her citizenship squared away, and then we have this next phase, which is then conversion, right? And we're not doing the fast track in the IDF. We're not doing the fast track of the Nativ. We're now in the Rabbanut. In the Rabbanut, the head Rabbanut of
I hear they're tough.
Oh, they're very tough. Yeah, they're very tough. But again, we were different, right? We weren't, like I said, we didn't come with the let's l'samen via, as we say in Israel, right? Just do the little check so I get my status and then live how I want. Which is unfortunately, you have a lot of that in the system of the conversion system.
Right. And the Rabbanut's seen a lot of that, and that's probably why they're so tough.
Yeah, the Rabbanut's seen a lot of that, but I mean, I will even argue the other way. A lot of people feel like they're like marginalized, right? They feel like they're being treated like some kind of outsiders, and that they have to prove themselves to be part of the country, be part of the people. So the argument actually goes both ways. And I know it's a hot topic. I'm not arguing for making it easier, right? But what I am saying is I also understand the heartache that a lot of people have had, and humiliation and whatever. And they're like, look, I'm not looking to be religious, but I am looking to be Jewish and raising up my kids as Jews, right?
Right, and the Rabbanut's not going to have any of that.
And the Rabbanut's not going to have any of that. So it's like, what I'm saying is I can understand both sides, because I've had friends who feel the disjustice and being treated poorly and whatever. And then you have me, which I'm like, well, I actually respect the process, and I embrace the process. And I came from a different perspective altogether. I came from a perspective of like, well, I'm actually going to live this out afterwards. Yeah. It's not just to do a V and then who cares about halacha and who cares about Judaism. Like, I'm actually really coming to embrace the Jewish lifestyle through and through. Now, it doesn't mean that I'm today ultra-Orthodox in my lifestyle or in my practice, but I'm definitely Orthodox in my practice. Yeah. And in my pursuit of what I'm shooting for, and so that became the next phase in our life, and in my wife and I's life, that we had gone through.
But what year was this that you?
In 2007, I believe. Mm-hmm. I think it was 2007.
Right.
And so the cool thing was that at this time we didn't have kids, At this time, we were married for 7 years.
And you got to get married again?
We got married again, yeah, exactly. For those who know, yeah. So we got married again, and it was really cool because the rabbi who did the process for us, he was the one who buried my twin outside of the Jewish cemetery, which caused a huge uproar with the people in Kiryat Shmona, who didn't understand, they're not, halakha experts, yeah. And they're like, but they're like us. Why would you do that? They've been to our brit, right? So all my brothers and myself had done a brit milah, according to halakha, everything, with a mohel, the whole deal. So in their minds, we're one of them.
That's interesting. Why?
I know.
Why did your parents do a brit milah on you?
Because and this is what I did not know up until that moment. My father was trying to attempt to do Jewish conversion, but because my mom had mental issues, they canceled it out. And they said, she's not really,
She's not capable, yeah.
Yeah, we don't feel comfortable that maybe today she's going to say yes, but then tomorrow she's going to say no. So that was the decision that was made, and it kind of blocked, that process for us. But I mean, I didn't know that, right? But I'm learning that on the same day, because that same rabbi was the same one that had my parents in front of him. He's the same rabbi that buried my twin brother, like I said, and make this decision. And I heard this all for the first time on that day. I had not known that. And he smiles. He goes, you know what? This is like a closing a circle for you because your parents tried. And I'm like, what? I was like, nobody ever told me this. And then other people told me, well, we're still angry with him because he buried your brother, blah, blah, blah. I was like, wait, he did that? And I said, you know what? Good on him. They're like, what do you mean? I'm like, that's halakha. Like bless him for sticking to halakha. Like that was a big decision to make. And I'm honored that my twin brother was the one that kind of was the first one to kind of break through that decision making that was to become the principle, right? To become the foundation for any other non-Jews who will have to end up being buried in the cemetery and where,
Right.
So that was the first.
By the way, we lost track of your younger brother.
So that was the first chelka, outside the Jewish cemetery that was instituted because of my twin.
So what happened to your younger brother? We lost track of him.
Well, my younger brother, he just continued to live his life out in Haifa, and still till today actually, still lives in Haifa. He deals with movie editing and production, like filming, editing. So that's his main skills that he's really gifted at and good at. But again, he's continued his lifestyle. Right. So very, very anti the whole Jewish thing and whatever. I would say anti, but I mean, it's not his cup of tea. Yeah. Is a good way to put it. And we just kind of live separate lives in a way. Yeah. But we of course keep in communication and contact and everything. But it's kind of funny. It's like one brother chose one way, the other chose just to stay where he was at, and it is what it is.
Fine for him. Good for him. That's okay. So you finished your conversion, and then were you still in the army? You went back into the army?
No, this is after the military. Yeah. So this is after my formal military service. At this point, I'm a reservist. Mm-hmm. It's just after the Second Lebanon War, actually, right? And then I'm in the beginning of my security career, doing security for the Israeli government. So we actually leave the north and move to Jerusalem because I basically had to choose if I was going to work for the government. Then you choose like certain regions of the country. I can't really give the details, but basically Jerusalem's one of the main hubs for security work, for government security work, and everybody knows that. And then of course
you have intuitively obvious, considering that's where the government is centered.
Yeah, and then we have have other locations in the country. There are sensitive locations, government facilities, and I just naturally chose Jerusalem because I was like, well, if I have to choose, at least choose something that I think might be a little bit more significant than some of these other areas that are away from anything of value to me, which is of course my faith, and Jerusalem. I thought would be a really kind of an interesting segue of getting into connecting to the holy city, connecting to obviously more religious Judaism, that I've been kind of sheltered from living up in northern Israel, where the religious life is a little bit more casual, so to speak. So I thought, hey, why not? Let's see how that is. And then spent many years in Jerusalem, and that was kind of the baseline for all of my security work. And today, after many years of doing that, I'm one of the main executive security guys that gets called upon to do anything security related in Jerusalem, because of my knowledge of the city, religiously, both from the Christian background, the Jewish background, because I'm considered to be somewhat of an expert on, for example, the Temple Mount for Christianity, as far as like my specialty, because back in 2014, I noticed that through my security work, that Jerusalem kept coming up on my radar, and specifically the Temple Mount. Constant violence, constant, breakouts of Islamic, riots, and my clients just going, why are they rioting? I'm like, I don't know. I honestly don't know. And I felt like a moron, right? It's like,
And it was specifically Jerusalem, not the other parts of...
Yeah, exactly. And so it kind of gnawed on me. It's like, why don't I know this, right? So then I started to research it. I started to look into it. And then I see the Islamic why. And I go, okay, so that's why from them. And then I'm like, well, does it have any value for Judaism or Christianity? And I look into it from the Jewish perspective is obvious. And I go, okay, obviously, the Jewish temples,
Right, I mean, this you already knew from all of your studies.
Yeah, so I'm going, okay, what about from Christianity? Because I've never heard anybody teaching on this from the Christian world ever.
Right.
And I know some of what is known as end-time theology in Christianity. That's where Jerusalem kind of comes into, of any importance to most Christians, is when it comes to what they call the Temple of Antichrist, right? So essentially, the view is this, that there is a temple that is built. Well, I'll put it like this. Let me backtrack a little bit. It's mixed into understanding from the Jewish prophets and New Testament commentary on that. Okay, so according to Jewish prophets, there's a third temple that's going to be built, and so on and so forth. But then the Christian spin on this that's added is they talk about an antichrist, who is someone who basically juxtaposes the Messiah. He's the opposite of the Messiah. Which is why he's called the Antichrist, anti-Mashiach. To put it plainly, is literally his title.
Right.
And so so the idea is the Mashiach comes or is about to come, and says feed on the Mount of Olives, make his triumphal entry into Jerusalem, etc. But there's this Antichrist who's trying to prevent this from happening. And part of the stages that leads up to the prevention part is that there is a temple that's built, and then the Antichrist comes and he defiles it. Okay? And then what sticks in the minds of Christians is what they call Antichrist temple. The temple of Antichrist is how it's phrased in Christian theology. And so in their minds, anything related to the temple is anti. Yeah?
Because the temple itself is a bad thing.
In their minds.
In their minds.
Yes. Because they connotate it to Antichrist and defilement. Yeah?
Okay.
And so that's something irrelevant. That's something the Antichrist defiles, and it's done away with. It's not important. But what's important is that the Messiah comes and establishes God's kingdom on the earth. But they don't think of, well, where does he do it from?
Right.
Like, what's the pinpoint of this
Right,
place?
like they say, like Jerusalem is holy to three religions.
Yes.
And the Christians have the Church of the Holy Sepulchre.
Correct. And
Right.
that's
the pinnacle. Which is not.
so the holiness to Jerusalem in the Christian view is where Jesus was crucified. Yeah.
Right,
And or where he
so the Via Dolorosa.
Yeah. So his tomb is holy, right? And the place where he ascended into heaven is holy.
Where is that?
On Mount of Olives.
Mount of Olives.
Okay. You have the Church of Ascension and all these. There's different places that
Is that
commemorate.
church with the big golden?
No. It's the one at the very top that's that has a pointy, almost like a pencil.
Okay.
It's one of which. There's a few that commemorate the Ascension, and then essentially, and then the future. So the future is that the Mount of Olives is where the Messiah is going to make his triumphal entry. So it's holy or significant in the sense of that's where he's coming.
Okay.
But
now why does it show up on your radar as a security guy?
Well, again, I'm trying to understand from a theological standpoint, right? I'm trying to understand what is the religious battles, because I recognize that the flashpoint of the conflict is a religious one. So I'm trying to understand what is the religious standpoint from each of the three monotheistic religions, which are the key ones who are arguing over this place. Yeah.
Okay.
And so we see that the violence is breaking out from the Muslims, but the violence is towards the Jews. But then the Christians are like not in this argument, right? Like, because we don't care.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, we don't care. It doesn't matter to us.
That
yeah.
makes sense. Based on what you're saying, that makes sense.
Yeah. The temple. It's temple. Well, who cares? Yeah.
Right.
And then I'm like, well, wait. But in the New Testament, it does matter. In the New Testament, the early Christians or the early church, they are all Temple Mount, as known as Temple Mount faithful or a Temple Mount sect. Really. They meet daily at the temple. They pray at the temple. They are very faithful Jews. The predominant.
That was the case, that the early Christians were Jews.
Correct. But not just Jews, but Jews that were very committed and very zealous for the temple, right? And temple service and so on. So you see that in the New Testament. You see that with the most dominant religious leaders of the early movement, including Jesus. And I'm like, wait a minute. Why aren't Christians seeing this? Because they're skipping to the end of the story, so to speak. They're stuck there. They forget the Genesis. It's like they skip over the genesis of where we come from as a religion, as a faith. Yeah? And the emphasis that both Jesus puts on the temple and all the later apostles and teachers and all the rest of the New Testament, which I'm seeing. And I'm like, and I'm going, wait a minute. And here's the kicker. The other reason that leads to the lack of interest in the temple is what's known as the Upper Room in Jerusalem. So there's a place in Jerusalem that's called the Upper Room. Millions of Christians go to this place and flock there yearly to commemorate the outpouring of the Holy Spirit. That's talked about in the book of Acts, okay? Acts chapter 2, for reference. So what happens is there's this big phenomenon that takes place, and Christians flock to the Upper Room to commemorate this important event in Christendom. But here's the kicker. It doesn't have anything to do with the Upper Room. The Upper Room is a place where a small group of like 120 disciples meet in somebody's house, whoever it is. We don't know who. It doesn't give you a geographical like X marks the spot. So actually, nobody knows where this Upper Room is, according to the text. We don't know. According to tradition, yeah, it's the Upper Room, this place up in what they call Mount Zion or near Mount Zion Gate. Sababa. But archaeologically, because I went to later on I went through the Israeli tour guide course, by the way, and so on. And so you look into all these things a lot more deeper. And then I've also done a lot of research with actual archaeologists in the Old City, some of the top archaeologists that we have. And then I got to the bottom of what's this Upper Room? Because I'm a kind of guy who just will keep digging and digging and digging. I want to get to the foundation of the argument. Like, give me the Genesis. Don't tell me what it is right now. where did it start? What's the very first point? There's a mention, a talk of archaeological.
Right. So you don't want just like the end halakha. You want to go through the whole process of learning learning the sugya.
Yeah, exactly. So I got to the very bottom. I discovered that this structure that everybody flocks to is a structure from the 4th century.
Okay.
So we're talking about 300 or 400 years after Jesus.
Yeah.
And his disciples of the early church. In other words, this is not the upper room.
Okay.
So we know that.
Okay.
And so I discover this. And I'm going, oh, interesting. So I'm like, okay, so if this isn't the place, then where is this place? And why did Christians come here? And, and so I'm reading the text. I go through the text and I discuss it with my partner for what I started in 2014, the movement Cry for Zion, or an organization. But it's really like a movement to the Christian world to get them to wake up and realize how important the temple is. And so he's a Christian theologian, John Anderson, and he's been studying for many years in one of the big schools in Sweden, learning Christian theology. And so I'm bouncing off with him and I'm like, hey man, why is this? Come on, let's get to the bottom of it. And then he's like, hey, the upper room, this outpouring of the Holy Spirit in Acts chapter 2, this is actually the Temple Mount. I go, what? He goes, yeah, it's during the hour of prayer, it's during Shavuot, it's where Jews are going to be congregating during the hour of prayer. As Peter, I think it's Peter who declares this. He makes this big proclamation, this big speech, and he's saying it's during the hour of prayer. It's on Shavuot. I'm like, wait, are you telling me that this took place on the Temple Mount? He goes, yeah, it's exactly what it is. And I go, wait. I was like, dude, this changes everything. Like, you realize this changes everything. And he's like, yeah, this changes everything.
But he knew this, and so he wasn't surprised.
Well, he didn't know this. We came up to, we both discovered it together.
I see.
As we're trying to dig to the bottom of, and it's like, bro, like, this is a big deal. And we're like, well, what are you going to do about it? Well, why don't we start a movement, an organization, call it Cry for Zion, and help Christians recognize basically their roots, but also it connects them immediately to the Temple Mount from a story that's one of the biggest stories in Christendom and one of the biggest tourist flockings for Christians who want to tour Jerusalem. Besides the tomb of Jesus, which there's, the Protestants have one, the Catholics have another, and there's...
Okay. he may be in multiple places.
Yes.
Okay.
But point being is, right, besides the tomb, wherever your denomination, your background, your pilgrimage is, there's also not only one upper room, by the way, but there's the most famous one that everybody goes to, and that's the one I'm mentioning. And when you check that out, right, you cross that out, and you relocate it as far as of pilgrimage to the Temple Mount, with the connection of we're going up there because of this important thing that happened in Christendom in Acts chapter 2 for us. And this is kind of actually also in Christianity, this is also in their minds, this is when the Gentiles of the world get what they call the gospel, when it goes out to the nations, not just for Israel. Yeah. So for them, this is where we, French, Chinese, whatever, African, this is where we get connected to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, right? That's their connecting point. Yeah. And
so what's your purpose in doing this whole movement?
So the purpose in doing that, it's bringing in Christianity into this conversation.
But why? Why do you want them in the conversation? It's loud enough with the Jews and the Muslims there.
Because there's a few reasons, right? So one is the Jewish aspiration, which is to build a temple. Call it a third temple, a fourth temple, however you want to split and dice it and cut it. Historically speaking, doesn't matter, right? Like, we don't care. You call it third, second, fourth, doesn't matter. For us, it's about a temple, right?
Yes.
It's commanded. It's halakha. We have to build God a temple. It's a mitzvah on us. There's no question about it for those who believe in halakha. And even those who do believe in halakha, if you know the conversation, there's so many arguments about, the sacrifice is something that we did because we had to, because we came from paganism and blah, blah, blah. So there's some Jews who just say, well, we don't, sure, a temple, but no animal sacrifice. And so there's all the discourse within Judaism
Right,
and whatever.
Those are details in the discussion, but Tachlis, we want a temple.
Exactly. But either way, however way you slice or dice it, there is even the ones who are against temple sacrifice, who are about reforming whatever, we all accept that there is a temple that needs to be built, no matter how you slice and dice it, right? So that's Judaism. There's no question there. The other thing that's key that I'm noticing from all the Jewish groups, all the Temple Mount groups, and there's a few, they all have the same phrase repeated, which is a house of prayer for all nations, right? Which is a quote from the prophets. And this is something that I find very interesting, because I don't think neither the first temple period, let's say of Solomon and so on, or the second temple phase and period had ever had really any real involvement from the nations. Like it wasn't really a big thing. It wasn't a big theme. I don't think they had banners where they said a house of prayer for all nations, yeah? But when you go to the Kotel and you go to worship on the high holy days, that banner's up there almost every time. Doesn't matter what the Chag, what the, right? Sukkot, Pesach, Birkat Kohanim, you're going to pay attention. You'll see the banners there repeatedly, and all those groups are all saying the same thing. And I'm like, well, why are they saying that? Why is this such an emphasis to us? Is what I'm asking. And I'm going, you know what? The only time this could be somewhat of a reality of a house of prayer for all nations is really with the Christian world, where there is a certain level of an Abrahamic faith base connection, right? That's not paganism purely, right? There is a connection here where I could see the Christian world connecting with that idea. And I'm also seeing, pretty heavy hitting, like the ones spearheading the temple movement, like people like Yehuda Glick and others, just to give one of the more well-known names in this movement. They are openly welcoming the Christians to be involved with that process. And so I think they see that value, they see that connection. I'm seeing the connection and how, I'm understanding the Christian world, and I can see how the Christians can come in a respectful manner to pray at the temple.
So what you're saying is it's building up basically a coalition of people, because if the Jews try to build the temple by themselves, everyone's going to scream.
Exactly.
But if you have the Christians of the world all coming and saying, "Yeah, we're on board.
Exactly.
Let's do this," and then that suddenly becomes a little more of a realistic thing.
It becomes easier to swallow, so to speak.
It moves the Overton window.
It does. Now again, it's not like I'm involved with this for a strategic reason. Yeah, I'm involved with this altruistically because I believe in a Jewish-Christian relationship that is helping each other. The Jewish world influences the Christian world, and the Christian world influences the Jewish world. I'll give you an example. The founding of the State of Israel, that was the Christian world that started the petitions and started the political pushing towar's a Jewish state. It was.
Can I challenge you on that? I mean,
you can.
What's your basis for saying that?
Do you know? Did you ever hear about Hechler, who is a pastor from I forget which denomination in Germany? He went to Theodor Herzl, and he actually took a Bible and he highlighted everywhere where it says that Israel will be restored, like prophetically, and he handed it to Herzl, and he says, "Herzl, forget about Uganda, Israel." And he gave him that Bible, and he highlighted, and he says, "Read, this is your Bible. These are your prophets. I highlighted for you, Israel." So he was a key person from the Christian world that basically got someone like Herzl, who wasn't a religious guy at all,
No, not
right?
at all. His first idea for solving the Jewish problem was that everyone should convert to Christianity.
Was it? Oh, okay. I didn't hear that.
That was Herzl's original solution, and what gave him the big shock was the Dreyfus trial.
Correct.
Where he said, well, Dreyfus was the guy who did exactly what I said he should do, and it didn't work out so well for him.
Right. Well, I know about but I didn't know it was that he actually before that had this idea with Christianity. That's interesting. But any which case, so we know Herzl didn't grow up with a Jewish upbringing. I understand it was his mom who was very strong in influencing him with classical Germanic mindset, teaching, whatever. But yet it's these Christians that were like, bro, you got it wrong. And then you had William Blackstone in America, who made a petition to the U.S. government, who then petitioned for a Jewish state, right? Contrary to Jews in the diaspora, they're like, hey man, we just want to keep our head down, and we don't want to rock the boat. Leave us alone.
So if things then were like they are now, then yes, Christians in the USA are more pro-Israel than Jews,
and similar like today in a bit. Yeah, exactly, similar like today. But what I'm saying is, and we all know that the Jewish mindset of that time, let's say in the 1800s, it wasn't about rocking the boat. It was very timid. It was very, let's just try to keep the peace and survive another day, right?
Yeah.
And the Tsar's anger and whatever might come our way. Let's just, And then you had people like Wingate.
Yeah.
So Wingate comes in. Again, a Christian Zionist.
Yeah.
Not from a mainstream Christian denomination, by the way. Mm-hmm. So he actually was kind of shunned from most of his British officers and people of his in his ranks, because he was this lower class whatever, because he's not from the mainstream. But again, he was Christian and he had his views, and he believed in Jews not just having their own state, but that they're going to defend that state.
Right.
And you need to build a military to do so. And Jews, again, are like,
we can do that?
Fight? Are you out of your mind? What are you talking about? And so that's what I'm saying. It's like when I researched the history of the Zionist movement, really, because, again, it's easy to look at it from our perspective, the Jewish narrative. But when you look at from the collective whole of influences and movements that was happening at the time, and you understand that there was actually a Zionist movement in the Christian world of part of the Reformation of Christianity,
right,
already in the 1500s. There was a man, and this is what I discovered in my studies, there was this man, I never studied in the Christian studies when I studied in Bible school, by the way, but this is what I discovered when I tried to understand what I'm telling you right now, because this is what I came upon in my studies when studying about the Temple Mount.
Right.
And what led to, and what led to, and what led to, what led to the state of Israel, what led to, right? And when you study all these movements and influences, you're like, your eyes are like, whoa! Like, so this is a catalyst to this, and this is a catalyst to this. So if the state of Israel was founded based off, in the 1500s, a guy was burnt at the stake for claiming that he believed that the Jews one day will return to their land. That's what he was burnt at the stake for.
Which is, of course, written explicitly in the prophets, but okay.
Back then, in the 1500s, the Jew was to be oppressed by mainly the Catholic Church.
Yes, that's right. And that's one of the interesting...
So that was a revolutionary thing. They just said that, right? Yeah. And they burnt him to the... They burned him alive for that, you know?
And that's an interesting little inversion that's happened in history. Yeah. Because actually, throughout most of history, from the time of the Roman exile, the Christians were the worst oppressors of the Jews, serial murderers, crusades, inquisitions, and just the soil of Europe is just drenched in Jewish blood. Correct. And meanwhile, it's not like the Jews in Muslim lands were like having a life of strawberries.
Right.
Okay. But it wasn't.
But it's way better.
It was way better.
It's
you had Spain. You
had the Dhimmi rules.
If you play by the Dhimmi rules, you're good. You're good. And you had more or less benevolent rulers. Right. And you had like a golden age in Spain, and you had and Turkey used to be also like a very tolerant and accepting, and they couldn't believe their luck when the Inquisition happened, and he said,
Right.
what did the Sultan say? He said, like, I thought that Ferdinand was a clever man, but he's sending his best assets over to me because he's sending all the Jews over to me. I'll take them.
Exactly.
All of them.
Exactly. And so again, my curiosity in what influenced these Zionists, my dad, right? Where did he get that idea from? You know? And so when you study the history of Christian Zionism and you recognize, and again, I know it better than most Jews because I studied it and lived it, you see clearly, like, okay, this is what influenced that, these guys that, this and that, you know? And then you're like, okay, so the 1800s was the golden age of the birth of Christian Zionism that gave birth to Jewish Zionism movement, which then gave birth to the State of Israel, which then gave birth to the defenders of the State of Israel. And then how I view it, and I could be wrong, but if I'm gonna learn from history, then the lessons we can learn from history is it's actually the Christians who are the ones that might give us the kick in the butt to be bold enough to maybe build that third temple. Yeah?
I can't argue with the pattern that I'm seeing.
Yeah.
Because, I mean...
And that's why I started Cry for Zion. It was just for that reason.
To go into like current politics.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm looking at the Trump-Vance administration, and they're being more pro-Israel than the Israeli government.
Do you know why?
Tell me. I'm dying to know. I'm honestly dying to know.
And this is why, personally, right now, I'm more excited for what I feel like God led me on this path with Cry for Zion. I really do. I really feel that this was a God thing. It's not a Doron thing, right? There's a few things in your life, I think, that when you're involved with them and your asiyah and what you're doing, where you can go, no, this is a God thing. It's not I had a great idea or my friend had a good idea for me, advice, whatever.
Yeah.
That you really feel like God just really made it like, I mean, he just threw you in the middle of like his perfect plan for your life. Mm-hmm. And for me, Cry for Zion is one of those few areas in my life that I can say I really feel this was that. And what I've seen, and I can say historically, what has never happened before, to my knowledge, like we talked about the Christian history with Jews and how bloody it is.
Yes.
When was the last time you ever heard of a conference where you had Orthodox Jews, rabbis, and Christian leaders come together and agree on a particular subject? Ever?
That does happen.
On what?
I mean, I'm not in the rabbinate. I've got friends who are in the rabbinate,
yeah.
and they go to the interfaith conferences and
correct. Interfaith conferences talk about Zionism, Israel, and all that.
Yeah.
Well, I'm saying anything other than that has to do with our faith.
But they'll talk
in
about
a big deal.
But they'll talk about issues like abortion, and they'll say, okay, look, there's some details that we got to iron out about what's acceptable, what's
correct.
not, and honestly, Jews are more liberal about abortion than Christians are.
Correct. So point being is those are small beans issues, in my opinion. A big deal is talking about the temple.
Yeah.
So we had the first conference in 2018, Temple Mount Conference.
Yeah.
Focusing on the third temple and discussing it. Having the top experts from the Christian world come and bring their know-how, expertise, whatever, speeches, and then having religious Jewish rabbis come and give theirs.
Yeah, and the religious Jewish rabbis are going to be sitting around and staring at their toes a lot. And
Correct. But they were the ones that came to me later, and they were ones that gave me the feedback and said, dude, this is insane. Like, do you realize what you guys did here? I'm like, I don't know. What do I do? And he's like, dude, this is like making history. And I'm like, okay. I was like, well, hopefully, And so that was the take back from some of my religious Jewish friends. I mean, now they're my friends. But at the time, I didn't know them from Adam. They just came to the conference.
Yeah.
And that was the feedback they were telling me. And so I was getting encouraged from their feedback because I thought that there would be a big Jewish religious pushback. It'd be like, hey,
that is exactly what I would be expecting.
Yeah, this is our thing. Let them leave it, let them stick to their own thing. But it was like, wait, this is something we actually can work on together. And
But I'd say I was thinking the pushback from a different perspective.
Yes.
Is that most halakhic authorities, and definitely not all, there's certainly enough people who hold a different position. But if you take a look, it's definitely at the Haredi society and a very large part of the religious Zionists just hold stay away from the Temple Mount.
Correct. So those are not the ones we're talking about. Right. We're talking about those who are pushing the buck for the collective whole.
Yeah.
Right. So I saw that, and I saw it as a positive. And then I saw Trump get into power, right? His first presidency. Mm-hmm. Then I saw that many evangelical Christians were getting in his inner circle. Not a lot, but starting to. And then you saw him make a move that encouraged my aspirations, I guess you could say, with Cry for Zion, even more so, was when he moved the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem official. Mm-hmm. Right? Why? And then what did you hear religious rabbis saying about his political move as? That he is a like to Cyrus.
Yeah, I've heard some people
you've probably heard it.
I've had a lot of people here say
Right?
he's like Cyrus. Jared is also very big on
right. And
I also heard people saying it's like a Chashverosh.
Sure. So when I'm hearing the religious community saying that, right, and voicing that in equal with what I'm hearing from the Christian Zionist world, one point being is, I'm listening to people that I consider to be people who, have their finger on the heartbeat of what's happening, currently and possibly future tense, and what should be main focus if it's Judea, Samaria, recognizing Judea, Samaria as part of the Commonwealth of Israel and so on, in all these different movements. Well, I'm the guy who's saying, yeah, but the Temple Mount. Because you can have Judea and Samaria, but if you don't have the heart, you have nothing. If we don't have Jerusalem, you can have Zionism as a movement, but without Zion, it's dead. Yeah. What is Zionism without Zion?
I mean, Zion is just another name for Jerusalem.
Thank you. But you follow what I'm saying?
Yeah.
In other words, our whole aspirations and everything that we care about and value is worthless. I don't care about Tel Aviv. I don't care about Haifa. I don't care about any of Eretz Yisrael if it means without Jerusalem. That's my understanding. Mm-hmm. That's my conviction. And so my goal is to get the rest of Israel on that same page and recognize that, listen, radical Islam is making Jerusalem at the forefront of their battle of trying to destroy our movement because they recognize that.
Yeah.
It's time that we recognize that. And guess what? The ones who are recognizing it and have recognized it literally officially, it's Trump's administration in 2018. But then I think it was 2018. Forgive me if I'm misspeaking.
It sounds plausible. I'm not going to quibble on the date.
Right. I forget the exact date. Forgive me, but then now his new administration is even a much stronger evangelical base.
Yeah.
Like most of his key players are super Bible-believing Christians, evangelicals. Mm-hmm. What does that mean for us? It means that these guys, right, who are at the closest to the President of the United States, not him in specific, by the way, just to be clear, he's not an evangelical per se. I think he has a lot of respect and respect, I guess is a good way to put it, a lot of respect to the evangelical world, but he doesn't prescribe to that per se. He'll let them pray for him. He'll let them pray for his
But do you think
meetings.
I sense he's had a little bit more of a religious thing in his life since he survived that assassination attempt.
Correct. That's an assessment that some people are making, and I would say that's a good assessment. But I can't say exactly how it's influencing his decision making on the day to day. But I would say it's definitely humbled him. Right. I think anybody who has survived a near-death experience is going to be humbled.
Yeah.
Right. And I know a lot of people who might be listening and be like, "Oh, that guy's not humble." We're all on different levels, right? Yeah. And you got to give some people a little bit more slack than yourself, and look outside of yourself sometimes, But for President Trump and his administration, I believe this is a golden age for him really becoming the modern day Cyrus, helping us as a people move the buck, move that needle even more so, right? I look at it like this. The dispersion, right, from the Romans, from the destruction of the temple, started in Jerusalem. That was ground zero.
Yeah.
And it went out.
Yeah.
What I'm seeing is the restoration of Israel is happening in reverse. Right? Eretz Israel, most of, Judea, Samaria is now becoming almost a no-brainer for most conservative American politicians, which I've spoken to. I've been meeting quite a bit lately with my tours in the U.S. and really trying to push this agenda with the Temple Mount. When it comes to Judea, Samaria, I don't have to convince them. They're convinced.
Yeah.
They're like, oh yeah, that's biblical heartland, Israel, all the things that people have been fighting for years now, thanks to the leadership that we have in Shomron and so on, and Christian evangelicals who have been supporting those communities and that voice in America and in all the conservative, most of the conservative world. That's not something we have to convince them of at all. So my job, the way I see it is, and this is also what I had one of the great leaders, Jewish leaders of this movement, tell me. I don't want to say who it is, but I took it as a mission, and they said to me before my trip to the U.S. They said, "So when are you like? What are you going to do to? How do you say? So I'm like, so when are we going to build the temple or something like that? Like, what are you going to do about it?" And I was like, you know what? Challenge accepted. You know, and that's what I did. Is I really pushed on this with these politicians in the U.S., the conservatives, and I explained the value, I explained the importance, I explained about the upper room and that whole thing.
Now you're putting some perspective. And tell me, did you speak to Pete Hegseth? Because he's on record as saying as he believes that the third temple should be built in Jerusalem.
Well, the point is the message is getting surfaced to the right people. I'm doing my part, like I said. I don't want to, it's important to be very careful with diplomacy. It's important to be very careful with how and what moves that people like myself are doing, because I see myself as a guy working behind the scenes. It doesn't matter how information is getting to who. Point being is, there are key people that in this administration that are getting good information. They're getting good insight. I see it as good because it's stuff we're discussing here. It's stuff, like I said, we're talking about Judea, Samaria. They're very, very well versed in that. They know it they know it inside out. They're convinced on that. That's not an issue. But yes, the Temple Mount, I think, is something that is more new to them, but it's also the message is getting out there, right? And the right people are getting the message, and they're getting it pushed, up the line, I guess you could say. And my goal is just to keep pushing, to keep nudging, and to keep praying, right? Because it's not. I don't see this as a man thing, right? Yeah. That we do it. I see it as a God thing. That when it's His timing, but it also is. We also have to collaborate with God, right? We have this cooperation here. So I'm just doing my part. And hoping that I'm not running ahead of of Hashem's plans. But,
I mean, this is like I'm just like processing this right now because I mean, what you're saying, it rings a lot of bells for me.
Yeah.
And I'll express my own frustration. Is that like, for me as somebody who has been religious for several decades, and I'm looking at life, I hope mostly through a Jewish lens, and it frustrates the hell out of me that we have a national leadership that is so feckless at managing the Jewish national role in the world.
Yeah.
And I mean, this whole negotiation and whatever with Hamas. Okay, I'm glad I don't have to make big decisions like this. Because
It's not easy, with all due respect.
You've got real situation with the hostages, and like, it was easy enough for me to sit in my armchair and say, the hostages are probably all dead anyway. Let's just go in and bomb the hell out of Gaza and whatever. And then we see the videos of actual live people coming out and being reunited with their families, and like thinking like, do I care how many, that they released 100, 1,000, whatever, how many terrorists
hundreds
they released?
Of terrorists,
Hundreds and hundreds of terrorists. These people, I don't care. They'll go back into Gaza, they'll be exported somewhere, we'll kill them later.
Yeah.
But we got these people, these precious neshamas home.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So,
and Baruch Hashem for that.
Yeah.
They made it.
Baruch Hashem for that. But now, like, then I see like this incredible language coming out of the White House, where Trump is like giving us the script. He's saying, I've got your backs.
Right.
Do it. Go. And our politicians are still standing around like, can we do that?
That's what it feels like. You're right.
It feels like that. And okay, I'm in my armchair and I don't know what their considerations are. And I know that they're still trying to get out as many hostages as possible. But also, the fact is, game theory, Hamas can never release the last hostage.
Correct.
Right? Because as soon as they let go of the last living hostage, that's the end.
Leverage is over.
Leverage is over.
Correct.
So that means maximum your number of live hostages is going to trend asymptotically to 1.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that means we're definitely, Rahman al-Islam, going to lose 1.
Mm-hmm.
So we're negotiating for all everyone but the last one.
Right. Right.
But like, at what point are you going to say, well, I mean, they want the Philadelphia corridor, and we say, bugger that, we're not giving you the Philadelphia corridor. That means we're resetting, and you're going to start getting all your weapons back in from Egypt.
Correct.
No, 100 times. Not for all of the hostages are you getting the Philadelphia corridor, because that's going to cost real lives everywhere else.
Correct. I think what a lot of people probably don't understand, and this is something I've tried to explain for people to understand what led to the October 7th attack, right? That scale.
Yeah.
That proficiency, training, brutality, etc. That comes directly from Afghanistan. It comes directly from the main training basis for the special forces of the West, of America, of Canada, of all these countries that were operating for 20 plus years in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in the 20 plus year war. When Biden left so brazenly and so recklessly, he left all of those resources to Al-Qaeda.
Right.
That meant that terrorists from Gaza were able to go through the Philadelphia corridor, which they had already been doing for years anyways, by the way.
Yes.
Going up into Baca Valley and training there and all this. But this led to them opening up to another opportunity, training opportunity, ideological opportunity, or ideological training and brainwashing to get them more radicalized, to get them on the level of Al-Qaeda, and get them super vicious and brutal, like those videos that we've seen with the slaughtering of these Christians and everything, and just the pure brutality in the murders and the way they carry them out, right? And the dramatization and the Hollywood version style of filming and documenting and etc., right? To just make it more disheartening for the enemy, us. All of that came out of the Pandora's box of hell that was opened by Biden's administration.
You think it didn't exist before then?
It did, but it was like the nail in the coffin. Not to mention, they're getting $40 million a week in cash flown into Afghanistan directly into the pockets of these terrorists.
Was this coming from USAID?
USAID, yeah. One of which. Let's not talk about European Union and all these other funds that are just streaming in endlessly. So you have the funding, you have the training, you have the equipping, and then making their way back into, and also getting sex slaves. So you have human trafficking through those tunnels. You have weaponry. Everything you can imagine happens through this corridor. So all that to say, what you're saying, for those who don't understand the context, that's the context. It's opening up the Pandora's box of hell into Gaza, into our front step of Israel, right? And correct, that's unacceptable. We cannot allow the corridor to be any which way accessed by any terrorist, period. And so unless Israel has a full control of this, of the Philadelphia corridor, then all kinds of hell can come in and out continuously.
I was like left very concerned because like there were some news reports that came out in the last week or so that Israel that seemed to indicate that Israel had actually agreed to leave the Philadelphia corridor in phase 2 of the negotiations.
They should never.
Was that? Do you think it was a bluff? Do you think that they could? Yeah,
because I'm telling you, I've just told you what it means. That's the ramifications.
And it sounded to me like when Netanyahu went in front of the cameras and showed everyone what Philadelphia was about and why it was so important that we could not possibly use it, and like that was the one thing that swung him from voting for disengagement to voting against disengagement and leaving the government when it was already too late.
Right.
Was because he said no, we can't give up Philadelphia, and they said no, we're going to give up Philadelphia. Yeah. And. So for him now to give up and say, okay, fine, we'll give up Philadelphia just for the for the last hostage or whatever. That's do enough Israelis understand this?
No. I haven't heard it on the Israeli news sources at all. What I just told you.
Yeah.
Maybe they're talking about it. Honestly, I don't watch Israeli news, right? Personally.
Me neither.
I have it up to here with just non-ending chatter.
Yeah.
I'm dealing with PTS, right? Honestly, I get information overload, right? I can only read so much. I can only consume so much. So I really kind of focus on the majors, so to speak.
Yeah.
And I try to get my information from intelligence analysis, to get it from people who basically do spend their time raking through the media and whatever, and then giving you the breakdown. And then what I'll do, if anybody who follows me, I give you the breakdown of the breakdown and just get to the bottom line.
Yeah.
So unless somebody here in the media is talking about it, to my knowledge, none of my friends are talking about it.
Yeah.
None of what I just told you about Al-Qaeda 2.0, about October 7th planned attack for the United States on a way larger scale, right?
Well, just tell me. Okay, now you've said it. You got to tell me what you're talking about.
Well, that's what I've been talking about in the States. My main mission on the 1-month tour that I did in the States was literally to warn the Americans from lessons learned from our October 7th.
So I thought that you might be talking about a synchronized one that was planned. You're saying that's something that's in the works.
It's in the works right now. It's in the work. So it's not a question.
And the enemy is already inside the gates.
Oh yeah. They're inside the gates again because of Obama's administration, by the way.
Yeah.
And Biden's administration. So it's combined years, and we're talking about years of, was it like 12 years? Both those presidencies. Yeah. So we're talking about 12 years of open gates, open policies, insane
because they
policies.
Thought they were importing new voters, and
because they had their reasons, correct? Because again, for the conspirators, I don't think honestly these folks were trying to fund and support terrorism per se. I think they saw that the end justifies the means, and in their minds they were, they're going for their aspirations, not per se supporting terrorism. Again, to be nice, right? And not to really throw around too much conspiracy. But in any which way, even if it was for so-called good motives, and you're really that dumb to not recognize what you're bringing into your country, and maybe they are that dumb, it's very possible.
Yeah.
They have opened up the Pandora's box, unfortunately. In fact, what led to the October 7th, part of what led to the failures, like I said already in the Obama's administration, you know how there's the security fence to Gaza?
Yeah.
Do you know that there's a second security fence giving us a buffer zone?
I would imagine so. I haven't studied it myself, but
right.
Yeah.
Well, there is. I've crossed it hundreds of times.
And there always was a double fence here.
Well, no. After the disengagement, at some point, we created a buffer zone.
Right.
Because of constant rioting, constant threats, and so on.
Makes sense. How big was the buffer zone?
It's about, let's say, half a kilometer. From,
really? That big?
Something like that, yeah. Give or take. Maybe less. I think it's maybe less. But in which case, we're talking about a few hundred meters from the fence.
Right.
That once you cross that, you're already in Israel, right?
Yeah.
So imagine we had a buffer zone.
Yeah.
Do you know who removed the buffer zone? Because it got removed.
Netanyahu?
No, Obama.
What?
Obama pressured Israel to remove the buffer as a sign and gesture of goodwill to the Palestinians in Gaza, who are under constant threat of feeling that their land is being taken and whatever. So show a gesture of goodwill and remove that buffer zone.
So they moved the one on the Israeli side?
No, on the Gaza side. That's the buffer.
So the buffer,
in other
the
words,
buffer was going into Gazan territory?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And so essentially what it did, right?
Right. Was it left one layer of protection?
Yeah. So what it did, so imagine if when we saw the bulldozers bulldozing through the fences and all that, if they had to go through two fences.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you get what I mean? Now, some people might argue and say, oh, not a big deal. No, it's a big deal.
Because you get your early warning of like 1 minute earlier, and that's lives.
Yes, that's lives saved. So my point being is, there have been certain policies that we have buckled into. The Israeli government has, to U.S. pressure, that has positioned us in a position of vulnerability. It's not just done it to the people of Israel, but it's done because the thing is, at least these people are consistent. They're doing the same to the Americans. So my message while I was traveling the States, and people can watch the podcast and listen to the full explanation, but bottom line is I was just giving my assessments from what we learned from October 7th and how the enemy is in the gates for you in America and in the West, and your October 7th is around the corner. And the difference is it's going to be on a much larger scale, and it's going to be devastating. So the question is, what are you going to do if you had the advantage that I did not have of pre-knowledge of an October 7th, and now I'm telling you, well, it will happen. Look at what we had.
Now the Second Amendment is starting to sound like a really good thing.
Exactly.
Oh my word.
But it's not just that. It's not just arms and weapons.
Yeah.
It's what I've encouraged people to do is to build relationships with the Jewish community, with the Christian community, and even with the Islamic community. Because what's going to happen is Jews are going to be targeted, as you know. Christians are going to be targeted.
Already are being targeted.
Thank you. Christians are going to be targeted, and have been. And I know personal stories from pastors who have been persecuted for flying the Israel flag in solidarity with Israel and so on. But then mosques are going to be targeted as a backlash from the violence from Islamic extremists against innocent people. Then there are people, right, who don't know how to handle themselves and handle that trauma. They're going to try to take it out on the Islamic community, and then they're going to probably take out and do attacks on local mosques and so on. So the point being is, because a lot of people go to this extreme, they go to weaponizing and training and fighting and combatives. Sure, that's important. You need to know that. You also need to know medical and how to plug holes, not just make holes, right? So know how to do trauma care. But not just that, learn how to work with the local sheriff's department. Let them know you're there. Let them know you appreciate them, right? There's the whole defund the police. But what if your church community or your synagogue has a direct line to the local sheriff's department?
Yeah.
And you're constantly developing those relationships, just like we have here in Israel, because what I'm trying to teach them to think about is what we experience, the war fighters who are going in fighting, but then in the areas where we would collect before going into a mission, you have Israelis from the secular community, the religious community, all the makeup of Israeli society. Doesn't matter their background. They all show appreciation, bring goodies and food and whatever. And you feel the love and the backing of your people, right? So what's my incentive now as a warfighter to carry out my mission when I see my people treat me like this? Versus, lo sofrim otcha, right? The Hebrew of, they don't care about you. Defund the IDF. The IDF is committing war crimes. We hate the IDF, right?
Well, who's saying that?
I'm saying if in contrast.
Yeah.
Right? what would be my incentive to go and fight for your butt if that's your attitude towards me? Which is what happened in Vietnam. And when I meet veterans in America, and that was part of my talk, and I say, guys, I meet veterans all the time because they kind of gravitate to a guy like me because they have the warrior spirit and they can relate to me. Yeah. Right? The normal guy in the crowd maybe less, and I can tell they might get a little like shock and awe from my presentation. Not that that's my intention, but the warrior guys, like they can connect to that immediately to that presentation. But what I noticed is when we have a conversation afterwards and they come and talk and thank you and all that, I immediately can see on the face, on the body language of the ones who've been in Vietnam versus the ones who were in Desert Storm or in the 20-year war.
The Vietnam guys were treated like dirt.
Yeah. They feel shame because they were shamed and they were told that they were baby killers. And that's part of why I started my podcast during this war. That's why I started going on the offensive, not just on the battlefield, but on the Hasbara field and fighting tirelessly to get the message out and to combat against the claims of what they're saying about us and rejecting it wholesale and saying, not that I'm living in denial, because I'm there. I know what I'm doing and I know what my military is doing. I'm on the forefront of the war and we're not committing crimes. And so that needs to be voiced, what we really are doing.
So who's your audience that you're saying this to?
Basically the North Americans, usually Europeans. I've been to Norway, spoke at the parliament there.
Yeah, Norway's not a friendly place, eh?
No, but I called them out on it. Because the thing is, what I'm showing them is I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid of your intimidation. I'm not afraid of your labelization of me. Yeah. I'm going to tell you to your face about your hypocrisy, your lies. You have Free Palestine flags and movements all throughout Norway, but not one poster of a hostage. Forget the IDF. Forget supporting the evil Netanyahu government. Yeah, if that's your view, fair enough. It's a view. What about the hostages? What did they do wrong? What did they do wrong? Do they not deserve a voice in your country? And just calling out the facts that I witnessed. And unapologetically.
What about? Have you got anything to say about Syria, about slaughtering Alawites and Christians and Sudan and Congo and whatever? You're screaming about 10,000 Palestinians.
But you want to hear the hypocrisy of these people? They're smarter than what you just said. Yeah. Like we think they're so smart. They have an answer for that.
Yeah. What's it?
Because I've heard them say it. Yeah. They say, "Oh, so you want us?" In fact, it's a classic clip that is being reshared right now by Caroline Glick when she had the discourse there with one of the ambassadors. I forget from which country, but ironically I did security for that event, so I was there front and center when she said those words, and I'm like, yes. But of course, I can't say that as a security professional. Yes. But in any case, so if you notice that latest Caroline Glick reel that's been getting reshared now,
I don't recognize what you're talking about.
It doesn't matter.
I listen to a podcast occasionally, but
So it's from a conference that she was at, and she was on the talk panel there on stage, and the guy made that point. He made that point, and she shot him down. He goes, "Oh, you want us to compare you to the slaughter of what they're doing at the time it was the Arab Spring. You want us to compare you to this and compare you to that and blah, blah." And then she had a counter argument to that. And it was savage. It was great. But point being
what did she say? I want to know this.
I can't say it the way she did. So you got to watch it. Okay. I'll try to find it and share it with you. But imagine I'm sitting there front and center, I'm standing somewhere in the, doing security for the event, and I'm watching that and I'm going, dang, that was awesome. Because what happened is I recognized, they understand that counter argument, and they have an argument for that argument. And what their argument is simply this: "Oh, you want us to compare you to the savages of the Middle East or the Congo? Or would you like us to compare you and hold you to a higher standard?" is the argument.
Okay.
Counter argument.
Right.
They don't understand. The point is they missed our point. Yeah. Because they don't know what it's like to be Israeli. They don't know what it's like to be Jewish in the diaspora and to have constant anti-Semitic attacks against us. They don't know what it's like to have a double standard towards us, which is what we're trying to call them out on.
Right.
So the argument to say, well, there's worse things happening in the world is kind of a weak argument, and I agree with that. That it is
But what it does show is that if the only thing that you can focus on is where the Jews are, then this is not about being pro-Arab or pro-Palestinian. It's about being anti-Jewish.
Correct. And that's not, and exactly, and that's the argument we're not, and that's the argument we're making. That's the argument we're making is not, well, look at this or look at that or look somewhere else. We're not saying that. But what we are saying is what you just said. And that's the point.
Yeah. So in that little break, you showed me that Caroline Glick video. It was it was a mic drop moment where she went absolutely savage on the Europeans about their obsession with Israel. But nonetheless, it's a reality, and I think like we've almost got kind of a battered wife syndrome in Israel that we just don't know any other way. And honestly, our epigenetic memory goes way back beyond the founding of the state. We are, like, as a people, we have been battered and bruised and persecuted and murdered and tortured and whatever through thousands of years of exile. And what we have learned throughout, whether you're Sephardi or Ashkenazi, what we have learned is keep your head down and hope the Goyim leave you alone.
Right.
Okay, that's basically epigenetic memory, and we're starting to unlearn that a little bit in Israel.
Correct.
Where we actually like just have, to some extent, we just say, okay, I don't care what you said about us now. We've just been through October 7th, and that was such a red pill moment. Well, I don't know if it's a red pill or black pill. I don't know what you call it in modern parlance. Right. But it was like we actually just cannot afford to care about what you think. But nonetheless, I still feel like we still have been locked into this kind of thing. And whether you're talking about Israel's military response to whether it's Gaza, Hezbollah, Syria, Yemen, Qatar, dare I say, and Iran.
Correct.
Right. So, or whether we're talking about building a temple, it's all the same kind of pattern that I'm seeing, is that Jews are too scared of making waves. Correct. Okay. And what you're coming and doing, whether it's through your organization, what's it? Cry for Zion. Yeah. Right?
Mm-hmm. From Zakah, by the way. Zakat Zion. Right? Because a lot of Americans or English speakers will ask, well, why cry? Like as in cry? I'm like, no, as in a cry, like a Lion of Judah cry. Yeah? It's a rally cry.
It's a rallying cry.
It's a zakah.
Right.
And so I have to even explain the connotation. Right. Because I think that goes into what you said. Is the easy, the thing that we can accept easier is this cry of like, weakness, not really a place of strength, a place of, taking action, right? Like Peretz, right? Lifrotz, to, as we know from the Jewish story, the biblical Peretz, character, right? And I think if we look at the Jewish story, right, biblically speaking, it's about people who took action, right? Avram, he left everything.
Yeah.
He was a person of action. He wasn't a person who put his head low, who, didn't want to make ripples. Yeah. The guy made ripples that has led to the creation of the people of Israel. Right. It led to the creation of a religious movement for Israel, not just the people, but also it became the backbone of our faith and our prayers and what we emulate and receiving guests and what have you. Right. All these different. I'm trying to think of the word in English, but like these values, like what we know as Jewish values. But then it also gave birth to the Christian world and the values that they have, and all of Western civilization, right? They, like, for example, in Arkansas, when you go to the capital of Arkansas, and I told them this, I said, this is encouraging to me And this is and this was actually my argument to them, if you will, or my encouragement, my pep talk to these politicians, to these Christians that I was speaking in Christian audiences, is that you have to fight for the Judeo-Christian faith. This is the foundation of Western civilization, and it's something you have to fight for. Don't just take it for granted. Just because you have the Ten Commandments outside of the Capitol building of Arkansas doesn't necessarily mean that people are going to respect those 10 commandments. Yeah. We have to keep teaching this to our children, that this is what this nation is founded upon. It's founded on Judeo-Christian values, which is the Bible, right? And I think the same is also for Israel, like you said. The Jewish people have been in the diaspora for thousands of years. And unfortunately, what I'm seeing is that the Jews are coming back to the land of Israel, the Zionist movement, like we talked about, and what led to, and whatever. And Baruch Hashem, we have a land, we have a country, we have a military, we have the revival of the nation of Israel, so to speak, and the language, and a lot of great monumental, historic moments. But what I'm noticing is what you just voiced, is that the Jews have left the diaspora, but we need to get the diaspora out of us. You have to get the diaspora mindset, rid ourselves of the diaspora mindset. We no longer have to appease the tsars. What we need to do is we need to do what God has commanded us to do, right? When it comes to, and this is my argument too, right? It's not Israel's land, it's God's land, right? It's the only land in the world that God basically says is mine. He created the world, the universe, everything we know, but then he says, like this right here, it's mine. And there's a people group out of all of what I created that I want them to be custodians of this land. And here are mitzvot on which how they have to live and like guidelines on how they're going to live here. If they do this, they'll be blessed. Right, and the land's going to give up its fruit, its produce. There's going to be blessing, right?
We already see that. I mean, from a country that was absolutely barren at the time of Mark Twain,
exactly,
to the country that's producing grapefruits the size of basketballs.
Yeah. And so we're seeing a revival of that. And to me, the encouragement and the attitude of the Jew should be to be encouraged to keep the mitzvot, to fear Hashem, right? To have yirat shamayim. And to be encouraged that God's with us. And to quit fearing the nations. Quit fearing the what ifs. There's always going to be a what if. There's always going to be if America doesn't exist as a superpower, there'll be someone else. I don't care who it is.
Yeah.
In my view. Because my view, I think, is also contrary to the diaspora Jew. I'm the guy who was born and raised in Israel. I have the Tzabar spirit, Tzabar mindset. And I think we're a different breed of Jew. We're the unapologetic Jew. We're the I don't give a flip about the attitude of the world Jew. Yeah?
Yeah.
We're different. And I can say we because, again, I did conversion, whatever, but I grew up with that mentality.
You're more Israeli than I am.
But I grew up with that mentality. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I grew up with that generation of Jew, right, who was not born in the diaspora. Yeah. I grew up with Jews who were born in Eretz Israel, who spoke the revived language.
And you have the advantage of not having that epigenetic baggage.
Thank you. and I think that's why people will see me as aggressive, different, pushing the buck. We don't talk like that. And I'm like, I don't care. Because I really don't. You know, I mean, it's not like I don't care about people's feelings and I'm not apathetic and I'm not trying to understand you or whatever. It's not rude. And it can be interpreted as rude, right? A lot of people view tzabarim as like a rude kind of, rude kind of group of people. But that's not the case. It's just that, like, we really are unapologetic.
But that's why it's tzabar, prickly on the outside, very sweet on the inside.
Exactly. and that's what I learned, right? When growing up with these Middle Eastern Jews who are from the Middle East or literally generations who grew up in Israel, even after the dispersion in 70 AD and so on. And so you have either generations that grew up here or generations that came back here, but they had more of a non-diaspora kind of experience like the European Jew, right? And for them, it was like a natural transition into the next phase of Israel, right? This next phase that we're living in right now, which is a miracle in itself. And it's a phase of, hey, quit thinking about what the world thinks. Quit thinking and worrying about this, that, the other. You have God behind you. You have your mitzvot. You have your Torah.
Yeah.
We have everything we need to be successful, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
We just have to embrace our calling. We have to embrace our identity as who we are. Not be ashamed of that. Not try to, I'll give you an example of what I mean. I do a lot of Israel diplomacy and promoting Israel because I love Israel, and I see the promotion of Israel as a promotion of what God is doing in the earth and in the world, and an encouragement to the nations. Hey, you can partake of this blessing as well. By the way, it extends to which is why there's a house of prayer for all nations, right? It's that extension of it's for Israel, but it's also for the nations to partake of if you have the right attitude, and you want to partake of this blessing, you can. Yeah, it's for all, first of all, right? But it's mostly and foremost for us to take that lead that we've been put in, to be the leader, to be the ones who lead the way, and be a Ol Goyim, right? But there's no way on God's green earth that I'm going to share any of those pro-Israel videos, like those really cool ones where they show Tel Aviv and Eilat and this and that and all the beauty of Israel, right? These modern videos that you'll see that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs produces. Yeah. And they love to highlight the gay parade. They love to highlight the...
No, that's not
And I'm like, you know what? I will share anything that promotes the beauty of Israel, but not that. Yeah. I'll never share that. Why? Because to me, that's the downfall of Israel. If we become like the nations, then we've lost our edge. We've lost our blessing. That's how I see it. Yeah. To me, that needs to be detested from our culture. This new Israel, if you like, this new phase that the nation is in, and the more we try to play with this, we're like everyone else. Yeah.
That's where things go bad.
That's where things go bad. Yeah. And that's what we see with the far left. That's what we see with these extreme protests and anti. It's anti, right? It's just anti. Look at it. Black flags. Come on, man. Seriously? You don't see that as a negative? Mm-mm. How can anybody see these as a positive? You know? Lech, lech, lech. Come on, man. That's your slogan? That's your slogan? Make America great again? That's a cool slogan. Yeah. I don't like it. I don't agree with it, but it's positive at least.
Yeah.
I don't believe in make something great again. No, but if you can say rather, and again, when you word it in more correctness and it doesn't sound as cool, but I'm more of a altruistic kind of a guy, and I would like to hear something like more, let's go back to, I don't know, the foundations of America or the founding fathers. I don't know. But when you say make America great again, it's like, why? It's not great? or
well, that is actually the implication.
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, that's his whole theme is like his predecessor completely messed things up and he's coming to fix them.
Correct. But you get what I mean. Yeah. It's like, I don't even want to give the implication on a collective whole. Yeah. That as if the collective whole is as rotten as rotten leadership. Yeah. Or certain minorities. Yeah. Get what I mean? Yeah. Because to me that's kind of opening like this like lashon hara or whatever you want
100%,
to. You know what I mean?
100%.
I try to avoid. My point is, I think we need to start thinking more positive. We need to use positive language. We need to recognize the power of words.
Yes.
Messaging. And we need to recognize the attitude behind the message. I'm not going to get behind anything that's anti-Bibi, anti the nation of Israel in any way, anti-IDF, anti-Air Force, anti-Shabak, anti-anyone who is responsible for the failures of October 7th.
Yeah.
Or any other failures for that matter. As a collective whole, do I hold responsible individuals who had key decision-making and failed? Yeah. let their heads roll, 100%. But you get what I mean? The difference.
Difference
It's
is something that's substantial after an investigation, as opposed to holding a banner and get rid of him.
And this like this, you know. So I'm just saying. I think the Jewish people need to start being more proud of who we are. And quit having this kind of shaming or shame attitude. We have to have a patriotic attitude, right? I grew up with. It's a love for your land, a love for your country.
This is one of the things that makes me most positive, was that makes me so optimistic about the future of Israel.
Yes,
is that our Generation Z, our Gen Zs, are our greatest generation. Right, there was the greatest generation, that fought in World War II, and they right. That was called the greatest generation.
Correct.
This is our greatest generation. These are the people who have gone into Gaza, and they've gone into Lebanon, and they've gone wherever the hell they've gone.
Correct.
They have seen hell.
Yes.
And they come out,
and they stepped up to the plate.
And they stepped up to the plate.
Yeah.
They know they are the greatest. They are absolutely the greatest.
I really hope so.
And they're going to be our future. They're our future leaders.
Yes.
They're it's like, how can you wish for anything better? And I think that's something it's an inflection point that we might not see, for another decade or two.
Right.
But but these are the people, and they're stronger. They're stronger in their faith. They're stronger in their loyalty and their in their Zionism, in their commitment to the state, and it's just.
I think I'm going to have to agree with you on that. We got to do a lot of fighting with the younger soldiers, with the enlisted guys, less with the reservists, actually.
Yeah. Did you do active duty during this war?
Oh yeah. So my unit served 295 days in this conflict. We started the war.
You rejoined Givati?
No, we started the war with the Tzancharim. The enlisted Tzanchanim, right? The whole of the Tzanchanim of the enlisted soldiers. We're a specialty unit. We do have a special forces.
So you did eventually get into.
I did. Yes, in my reserves. Yeah, we kind of skipped on that, but yes. Eventually, a few years ago, I think it was back in 2017. I got recruited into a special forces special mobility unit, and essentially, like I said, we got positioned, and we actually transitioned from our home unit to the paratroopers, because they requested our capabilities for them as well to create that.
Right.
So what my team did, of these senior soldiers, and most of them come from a lot of the really high-end units of the military, and it's a very diverse group, and we all have bring different qualities, right, to our profession. And so this senior seasoned team of soldiers were sent on a mission, essentially, to create a very specialty unit for the paratroopers. And literally just months before the war broke out, we inaugurated the unit, right, that we had helped create for them. And then also went to war with that division of the paratroopers. And so all that to say that my personal experience with these younger soldiers who have never been to war, their commanders and their officers have never been to war.
Yeah.
By the way, right? Think about this.
Yeah.
Like that's how I'm looking at it from a guy who's been in multiple wars since 2003.
Yeah.
Okay. In fact, in every war that we fought since 2003, I got to participate in all of those wars, and under my belt and under the belt of every one of my guys, that's our story, right? That's our experience. And imagine we come in with all these years of experience, multiple conflicts. This isn't our first rodeo, but it's their first rodeo, including their commanders. Yeah, not the high up commanders, but from, like, let's say the platoon commander and down. They've not been in an actual war, to my knowledge. Maybe the platoon commander. My bad. Maybe the platoon commander was in Shomer Chomot or something like that. But that's not.
Yeah.
Again, it's not Second Lebanon War. It's not the 2014 war in Gaza and so on. It's not these major wars, right? And so for these young kids, it's their first major war. And like you said, they really prove themselves. To our shock, we as older farts, we kind of look down on these guys. Not to look down on them to for looking down sake.
But they're 20 years younger than you.
Exactly. We were just like, this is the TikTok generation, right?
Yeah.
This is are they really going to be able to embrace the suck, as we say?
Yeah.
Do they really got what it takes to go all in and all in on an all out war, right? Do they really have what it takes? I mean, we were questioning this for ourselves, right?
Yeah.
We didn't tell it to them. We didn't say it to their face, right? Just to be clear. I mean, we didn't walk around oh, we're better than you. Quite the opposite. We were very trying to be very humble with them. We tried to be level, eye to eye with these young soldiers. Whoever was open for mentorship, gladly, right? We'll share our knowledge, and we see ourselves as working together as a collective whole. We're a team. It's not A team over here and your B team. Together we're the A team, right? We're a collective whole. You're 20 plus years younger than a lot of us, of the A team guys, whatever you want, right? And the ones who are creating this unit. But you're the manpower. You're the one who's going to carry out these missions that we've qualified you to do.
Yeah.
Right? And we're going to do these missions together. Right? So we're relying on each other. We're in it together here, right? It's not like we're over here on our own. And some guys did that, by the way. And I won't get into that.
Yeah.
But some guys, had that attitude and they created a lot of mess. Did the whole John Wayne thing, we're better than. We didn't do that. We created rapport. We honored the younger guys. They honored us back. And like I said, they proved themselves, like you just said. And it's hard for me to say it. It's hard for me to see it. But in the spirit of positivity, in the spirit of the way I see it, we need to really support that generation. We really need to, because those who went before them and recognize all of our failures and the failures of our parents and the hippie generation, the whatever, right, from the greatest generation, like you mentioned, like my dad's generation. I kind of skipped a few generations. But you're right. I mean, they have all the potential in the world to do just that. And Bezrat Hashem, we do everything we can to empower them, to strengthen them, to encourage them, to lead and to be those future leaders that Israel collectively is looking towards and will be looking towards. And they're the ones who are going to build our future. And I agree with you on that. I mean, I think that's a very good assessment.
What would be really nice is if the timing works out well, is that we have our greatest generation coming into public service at the same time as there's a general awakening in the Christian world that we're actually on the same side.
Correct.
And now we're all coming together. Correct. And everyone's coming to Zion together as a unified whole. And it would be wonderful if the Muslims would join in. And
well, I think there's a lot of Muslims who will. By the way, I think there's a lot of Muslims that will. I know a few personally. But also I see them publicly. That I think they're.
It's not so easy for a Muslim to come out publicly.
No, it's not. But I think
because they kind of get beheaded if they say anything on the line.
Correct. They have more to lose. That's true. They have more to lose, for sure. And it's a much harder challenge for them than it's for any of us, for any Christians, right? But there are Muslims, I think, that are having. I would like to call it the Islamic awakening. Again, I don't want to be a guy give labels, but I'm seeing it as a type of an Islamic awakening of recognizing that we've inherited a religion of death, destruction, and it's embracing the Hebraic foundations that is woven into their faith, that they recognize that's the positive. And I think when they look at Israel, and when they look at Israel embracing our faith, as we should, and leading the nations as we should, I think that's gonna cause a chain reaction of that Islamic awakening, of recognizing and having a reformation, really. And
it's going to take a lot, because
but it's
what we're seeing from the Islamic world is not pretty.
But see, exactly. But see, that's the thing is ultimately, and this is why I try to explain to people too, because they think, oh, it's this, it's that, it's whatever. I'm like, listen, there's no rational, logical answer to the Islamic hatred, or any hatred, the Nazis, the white supremacists, whoever is hating on the Jew right now, right? And this anti-Semitic, there is no answer rational, right? The only answer, it's spiritual, right?
Yeah.
To me, this is a spiritual matter. It's a holy matter because it's God's plan, right? It's what He's willed for the earth, for Israel, for the eternity, etc. But in bringing us back to Eden, really, right? It's hence the Temple Mount. This is where Adam breaks faith with God, and this is where
Adam, the Garden of Eden is not located in Israel. I don't think it was more. It's difficult to say where it was, if it was, but there's no basis for saying that the Garden of Eden was in Eretz Israel.
Well, okay.
But what it is the place where the first place where it really rises to prominence is where Abraham brings Yitzchak as a korban.
Yes. But the tradition also says that Adam is created from.
He was right. He was created. So that's the foundation stone, and that's where.
Yeah.
Yes.
So what I'm saying is, and if I understand and did my research correctly, it's also why Yerushalayim is called Yerushalayim as in plural, because there's the earthly Yerushalayim and there's the heavenly Yerushalayim.
Right.
So my interpretation of that is that the Garden of Eden was taken up, right? And that essentially the Garden of Eden, if you like, or eternity with Hashem,
Yerushalayim Shel
Mala will come down to the Yerushalayim Shel Mata, right? So maybe I'm misinterpreting the deal.
I'm not an expert in this matter.
No, neither am I. But I'm just saying this is how I kind of simplify it, I guess you could say, in my mind. And I'm going, okay, so if this is let's just say it's not where Adam failed God, right? But at least we do know this is where humanity and everything that God purposed for humanity, the genesis of it is here.
Yeah.
But also the future of it is here.
Yeah.
And in other words, that's why this is such a trigger point, right? Because there are dark forces that be that don't want to bring that about.
Yeah.
They don't want the tikkun olam. They don't want man to have fellowship with God and eternity. Yeah. They want things to be chaotic the way they are right now, and continuously and for eternity or whatever. So all that to say that I think all people who are connected to that spiritual reality and are being awakened through knowledge and study and pursuit of God, they're going to come to that answer and they're going to recognize that. And I think that's what we're seeing. We're seeing it in the Christian world, where the Christian world is having an awakening. There are many Christians who are Temple Mount zealous, I would put it even. More than religious Jews.
Yeah.
And they're pushing the buck, right?
Yeah.
And they're trying to get us, and the way I see it from my interpretation of what they're trying to do, they're trying to get us, right, to recognize this is important to us by them showing it's important to them.
Such a weird thing how that
It is a weird thing. It is.
Yeah.
But it's because it's a spiritual thing. You get what I mean? You can't try to rationalize it and go, well, let's look at, the pogroms, and let's look at the Acquisition, and let's look at, the Crusades. You can look at that if you want. But what I'm seeing and what I'm recognizing, is that it's the true people of faith, I'll put it this way, who have pushed for the Christian Reformation. which I think is, and that's my point with Islam. I'm seeing that as something that's going to happen within Islam as well.
Be'ezrat Hashem.
As I hope so, and I think there are bold people, religious leaders within their community who are recognizing we need a reform. We need to reform our faith, what we teach, what we practice, which is what happened in Christianity, literally, and so point being is, if you can look at evangelical, God-fearing Christians of today who love Israel, who love God's land, who love God's people, who love the Temple Mount, and you're like, what? If I were to say that 600 years ago, you'd laugh at me
of course.
as a Christian.
What are you talking about? The Christians are the ones who like going on.
But you know what I mean? If you were a Christian in Rome and I told you that, you would mock me. You'd go, bro, you're crazy, and you better be quiet because they might burn you to the stake for saying something as insane as that. Yeah? But that's where we're at today.
That's if that's a possibility, and we do have a basis for it in Midrash, because we see that because when Yitzchak when Avram died, Yishmael and Yitzchak came to bury him, but the pasuk puts Yitzchak before Yishmael, which means that Yishmael deferred to Yitzchak.
Right,
and he was chozeh b'tshuva towards the end of his life.
Correct. And I remember.
And another sign of this is the fact that we don't do it nowadays, but certainly in the time of the Mishnah and the Gemara, Yishmael was a name that Jews gave to their children.
Correct.
Right, and ironically, Esav is the one who never does teshuvah. All that happens is he gets his head knocked off and his head gets buried in Machpelah, but his body doesn't.
Right.
So his head's kind of in the right place, but so I don't know. I don't want to like jinx the whole Christian, because the Christians really seem to be our best friends in the world.
Right.
And please God, we'll find an explanation for how that works out.
Correct. Exactly. Yeah.
But Bezrat Hashem, if it can happen with the Christians, then as you say, then I guess we have to have faith that it can happen with the Muslims too.
Yes. Yeah. And it'll take some brave leaders to do that. And many of them to pay a very heavy price for that, because that's what we saw in Christianity. There were many that were burnt at the stake simply for saying that the Bible should be translated into the common man's language so that we can read it and we can understand it and we can know what it says for ourselves and we can hopefully put it into practice. Yeah. So like for something as radical as that, and other things, a lot of times it's not just action or talk, but unfortunately it also will take some serious sacrifice. Yeah. And I think that will be no different for the Muslim world. But if it's going to be some brave individuals who are willing to step out, then I think Hashem will bless them with success. Yeah. Is all I can hope for,
Bezrat Hashem. Well,
and may there be many of them to do that.
Amen.
And because again, it says a house of prayer for all nations. So how is that exactly going to be put in practice? I don't know, but I just know it's what it says. Yeah. And I look at it like just like it says that Israel will be restored to our land, and
that happened.
And it happened. Then I can only have to believe that if what God said was true here, it's also true here, and it's also true for this and this, and anywhere else where God has prophesied and spoken. And who are we to question the Almighty? It's like, and I think it's just it's easy to be of little faith. It's easy to be of apologizing away big realities. Yeah. But it took again, if we learn from any of the biblical characters that were that had done anything of greatness. They all had to step out, and they all had to do things that it took serious boldness and serious faith, right? Mm-hmm. And chutzpah, if you like, to just and God used them, every one of them. Yeah. You don't hear of the ones that didn't do anything. Right. You don't hear of the ones who remained silent. You don't hear of the ones that didn't want to rock the boat. We only hear about those, right, who pushed the buck in their time and created those waves, and we hear about them in the good and the bad, for the positive and the negative. Wow. So I just want to be part of those who push push it towards the positive.
That's ashrecha.
You know.
Ashrecha. That's a great thing that you've latched onto over there. And like, I mean, we've gone massively over time,
Yes,
and
sir.
I have no regrets whatsoever. It's been the most amazing conversation and fascinating. All I can say is Yehi Ratzon she'i banei beis hamikdash b'mheira v'yameinu. That you should have a
Yehi
chelik
Ratzon.
in building it.
I would love to have any small part. I mean, it'd be awesome.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
very much for coming.
Thank you.
Hakol Sababa, where life takes a spin. Join the fun, let the talk begin. Hakol Sababa, where life takes a spin. Join the fun, let the talk begin.